Hello, everybody. Just want to let you know, Maureen is ill and will not be with us. But she wanted to emphasize in her text says she does not have COVID. She just is sick.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm glad that she does not have COVID, but sorry that she's sick.
But other than that, I think everyone will be with us.
Okay. Yeah, and it looks like we're all here now. All right, so it is 5. Is everybody ready to begin? Jeff, are we ready?
I think we've lost Jeff's audio.
Yeah, we may have. It looks like we're live on YouTube, so I'm gonna get going with our remote script. So, as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Arisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Here.
Seth Engelborg.
Here.
Arisman is here. Ian Golding.
Here.
Dave LaFleur.
Here.
And Joe Topham.
Here.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Good afternoon.
And Joanne Dodd.
Evening.
And then anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Looks like we have RJ Turcott.
Hello.
Art Gasparo.
Here.
Brian Madden.
Here.
Ryan Maxwell.
Here.
And Paul Santos.
Here.
All right. Good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address the questions or comments. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, I will get to tonight's agenda. We will open with public comment on items not being heard this evening. Jeff, do we have any public comment at this point?
We do, but it's for an agenda item later, so we don't have any other public comment at this point.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that, the following items are continued tonight. Under notice of intent, we have Weisenberger at 84 Pocomo Road, continued until December 17th. We have 5 Sherburne Way LLC at 5 Sherburne Way, continued until December 17th. We have Killian at 10 Mayhew Lane, continued until December 17th. Norton at 24 Cambridge Street is continued until December 17th. Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummock Pond Road is continued until December 17th. And then under certificates of compliance, we have BFP Properties LP at 13 Easton Street, continued until December 17th. And I believe I've gotten all of our continuances. So we will begin under notices of intent with Eli Zabar at 47 Squam Road, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent, which you had heard quite some time ago. That's not the plan, though. I can share it if it would be helpful, if you would like.
It looks like Joanne is saying yes.
The reason for the long continuance on this application was that Natural Heritage had requested some information, and that was related to salt hay, and there was a time of year that was beneficial or required to study that. So it put us out a little ways on this, but I'll share my screen, and this is the plan that's before you. The work is proposed as invasive species control and some landscape work within the buffer zone to vegetated wetland.
Art, it looks like we lost the plan and we're seeing something else.
Oh, sorry. I moved it so that I was looking at my camera instead of off to the side. Thanks. Sorry. And so we are working within the buffer zone to a vegetated wetland abutting Squam Pond. And the proposal is to manage invasive species through mechanical means, and then to put in some native supplemental planting. There's an existing split rail fence that would be relocated from within the wetland out to the wetland boundary. It's property that's been developed and occupied for quite some time. And again, we feel it was a beneficial project. Natural Heritage did sign off on the application after they did a fairly extensive study related to the salt hay, and I believe that's about all there really is to this one. I'd be happy to address questions or concerns if I could. You want me to stop sharing, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you, Art. Great. Are there any questions? Oh, Mark has a question.
Art, what does removal by mechanical means mean?
Through you, Madam Chair, essentially pulling it out as opposed to using herbicide. So uprooting, digging out, and not trying to treat it with herbicide.
So it's not a machine.
No, handwork.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Art. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one? Oh,
At this point, no, we do not. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Jeff, do we have all the required information to close?
At long last, yes, we do.
Please.
I'll move for approval.
Okay, so Art, you'd like to close?
Yes, please.
All right, so the motion to close was made by Mark, seconded by Joe. Oh, Dave, I missed you, sorry. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Town of Nantucket DPW townwide. Dave LaFleur has to recuse himself from this one. And it's represented by Tori Brown, Jean Crouch, and Robert McNeil.
Yes, I believe, oh, it looks like Jean is in now. So this is Tori Brown from VHB representing DPW. Rob McNeil is not on the line today. But essentially we are still waiting. We were hoping to receive comments from Natural Heritage. We're expecting to receive the letter tomorrow. So we are not able to respond to those comments until we receive them. So I imagine this will be a pretty short presentation. We have additional comments from the commission that we received last meeting that we are working on responding to, and are planning to provide responses at the next meeting, unless there are additional comments that come up now. That's about all we have at the moment.
Thank you, Tori. Are there any kind of questions from commissioners based on, what we heard last time, or any thoughts you've had since the last meeting? Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've been thinking about this application and the land bank application and the potential of other large conservation groups who are similar landowners of hundreds or if not thousands of acres coming before us with similar requests. But regarding the Town of Nantucket application, I'm leery to give them sort of an open-ended approval. I think if only they were a smaller group, I would ask for a plan for each of the properties and then give them a carte blanche to keep that plan going. And if they want to change the plan, to come back to us. But the DPW was so big, owns so much or maintains so much real estate. I'm not sure what to do, but I'm reluctant to give them a carte blanche across the board waiver of just being able to do in essence what they feel is right without any oversight from us. Am I crazy in that view?
Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. I don't think you're crazy in that view. I share some of your reservations, and I think I expressed this a little bit last time, but it worries me that some of these traveled ways, I might go down one day and see like major road, side of road clearing that maybe I hadn't expected. So I can definitely understand that. And I think that's one of the reasons we are trying to ask the DPW to clarify a little bit maintenance work versus, new work or something more extensive. I don't know if other commissioners kind of share this feeling or have ideas how to kind of make the application seem kind of easier to pass, less like there could be massive changes. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to echo what Mark said, I think I expressed the similar reservations at the last meeting.
Thank you, Ian. Joe?
And I would follow on Mark and Ian's comments.
Mark and then Seth?
Let Seth go next. He hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm on a similar vein, but I think that most of the issues can be dealt with just by incorporating the right conditions and definitions into an order of conditions. And the one thing I am expecting that order to be is massively long. So depending on how far we get in the process, you know, we might have to have a special meeting just to go over that one order. I mean, I'm thinking about how long the order is for like the SPPF geotubes, and this is probably going to be longer than that. And I think that nobody is asking or trying to give carte blanche approval here. I think we're trying to create a conditioned order that has strict limitations. So I think it's just about the right wording. But that being said, the things that I mentioned last time, including structural repair and vista pruning, I still don't think they would qualify under this order. I think that in our minds, we don't want to impose conditions that are burdensome to the DPW. But no matter how burdensome we make this, how many requirements we ask them to do, how many submissions we ask them to make, it's still going to be less than having to make a submission every single time they want to do work. So I think we're completely justified in asking for notification of work starting, notification of work ending, annual monitoring of annual reports of exactly what happened. I think the more amount of information we get for them is going to be helpful for the commission going forward.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Yeah, I was thinking about a generalized order of conditions, but then on certain properties, a more specific one. I'm not sure how it would work, but it's a monumental undertaking, and I anticipate the order of conditions being lengthy, and I wanted to ask Seth through the chair if I could, Ashley, did he anticipate this long order of conditions being property specific or order specific?
Seth, do you want to answer that?
If I may, I think the orders relate to the activities being performed. So it would be across properties for, let's say, bike path clearing or maintenance, across properties for bridge maintenance, across properties for signage replacements, all the other things that they've mentioned. I think if we have any specific reservations about any one property that needs to be treated differently than the rest, we're well within our rights to impose property specific conditions as well. But I can't off the top of my head think of why we would need that yet. When we have the discussion, we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Seth. And that kind of brings me to a question for Jeff. Jeff, obviously we look sometimes at other commissions to see what examples they have that might relate. Is there any way we could look at a sample order like this that kind of blankets a whole township? Are those out there? I think that might help commissioners just wrap their heads around these big applications from both the town and the land bank.
Sure, I know specifically of one from Central Mass, so it doesn't necessarily involve coastal resource areas, but I can certainly try to get a copy of that and provide that to the commission. I just don't remember which town it is in Central Mass off the top of my head, but I know one exists. And it's the only other one. So this is kind of a new idea from there. And then both groups here have had issues before, not of compliance, but of questioning of methodology and things that are going on. And I think are, genuinely efforting to provide information to the commission on their general daily activities and practices that they're doing within jurisdictional areas that currently don't necessarily have permits that just go on through the maintenance provision of the act and the bylaw, and just trying to start that conversation to provide you guys the information of what exactly is happening and what everyone's expectations should be. So I do like Seth's idea of an order that kind of goes activity by activity. Seems to make some sense.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
Yeah, and I agree with what Seth was saying. I think that it has to be an order specific to that property, which then gives guidelines for any one of the DPW's workers to go on that property or near this wetland. This is as far as I can go, and then some parameters. I mean, I know it's a lot of paperwork, but I think if they could get it all organized per site, per project, then I think, yes, it's a lot of reading for us, but I think if one gets done, bring it in, say this is what we will be doing moving forward. Then we can take them one at a time. We can take one hit at a time. It's not going to be quite as a undertaking for us or Joanne and Jeff. But I do think that we should get something, and then going forward, then it's an email to Jeff, like, per this order, working by Satchel Pond, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, which follows the guidelines that's already been approved. And, it's already conditions we've laid out, spelled out. And it's, 1, 2, 3, steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Jeff?
So I hear what everyone's saying. I think the one thing that's, just to kind of think about and contemplate with this is a lot of the work that the DPW is doing is not parcel specific. Anytime they're doing roadway maintenance and layout maintenance, that doesn't necessarily have a parcel attached to it. It's just, the Pulpus Road layout or the Nantucket Road layout. So it doesn't work or identify quite the same way. And some of those roadways also, some of them are long and apply differently and go through different areas. So that maybe have to be a separate break for activities along traveled ways and roadways, and then parcel specific information. But I was just trying to think about all of the different subdivisions that we're going to have to kind of look at that way.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that's important. And I think it speaks to what Seth had said about, notifying staff as part of the conditions. And that way, the DPW can say, all right, we're doing all the bike path maintenance on Pulpus Road. And you guys in the office can say, okay, watch out for the wetlands in areas A, B, and C, and hopefully that will streamline the process for everybody and still keep information kind of flowing between both entities. Seth?
Yeah, if I may, I think that some basic helpful information would be at the beginning of each year, the DPW director submits an expected work plan so that we know it. You don't have to be held to it, but here's the type of activities that are likely to occur in these months. We don't need weeks or days or anything. Just this will probably happen then. This will probably happen then. And then when actual work is going to take place, getting an express notification to the Conservation Commission or to staff. And then for each project, just some basic monitoring, photographs of what was done, a short report, and then all of that could be just sent in at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, we know DPW did this many projects across this many parcels on this many activities so that we can track, annually what they're doing. And also so that we can just review those maintenance activities and make sure that they're falling within the expected definitions that we laid out in the order of conditions.
Thank you, Seth. Those are great points. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
Nope.
Okay. So Tori, you made it seem like you guys need to continue for Heritage. So would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes, we would like to do the 2-week continuation.
Okay, so this will continue until December 17th.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that moves us on to Nestor at 4 East Lincoln Avenue, and this is represented by Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you. So for the record, Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering. The property at 4 East Lincoln Ave is located in an area of land subject to coastal storm flowage. The flood zone is an AE zone, elevation 7, and the site is at roughly a grade of 3 to 4. What the applicant would like to do is to take the existing structure and relocate it to the rear of the property and to construct a new dwelling in its place. The relocated structure in the rear of the property would be built on a slab foundation, and the new structure at the front of the property would be built on a crawl space with the top of foundation above the flood zone. Both structures would have the necessary flood vents and flood proofing that FEMA requires. We're also looking to install a new pervious driveway, and we're proposing a stone trench around each structure to handle any roof runoff. That is more or less the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What material do you intend to use for the pervious driveway?
I don't know that that's been decided, but typically it's the crushed shell or gravel, pea stone.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any questions from the public on this one?
No, and we do have all of the required information as well.
Okay. Ryan, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
And that moves us on to Goldrich and Rice at 41 Crooked Lane, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application for work in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. I believe that most of you are familiar with this property. There have been applications in the past, most recently last January for a sewer connection. And the vegetated wetland boundary was determined at that time. That is shown in blue with a dash double dot line on the plan. And then shown in green, it's a little bit light, but there's a lot on the plan, so I tried to just use a few different colors. As both the silt fence limit of work, which would run pretty close to the wetland boundary, and then we show the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones in red. And as you can see, the 100-foot buffer zone is out fairly close to Crooked Lane. Essentially, all work on the property is within your jurisdiction. The proposal is to remove an existing garage structure, which is immediately adjacent to the existing dwelling, and to replace it with an addition and onto the house that's there, and that's shown in the lighter green color. And then to also add an additional structure next to the house above the existing shell driveway, which would be a garage with a studio type area above it. And then we've also shown a proposed outdoor shower, and there's a small area of the existing dwelling, which is located adjacent to the wetland, that's currently an outdoor shower that they would like to infill replace that with essentially interior space, again, over existing structure that is the deck for that outdoor shower. We realize and do request that there are waivers for this project. We have, it's a fairly large property that is mostly protected resource area, and their options and alternatives are extremely limited to essentially this area of the property. There's some large existing privet hedge that is next to the smaller, I guess I would call it cottage structure, which we're proposing to remove and replace with native species. And then the addition that would replace the garage is almost entirely outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. Essentially, the area that is within the 50 is very close to the same as what's there right now for the portion of the garage that's within the 50. Just essentially small corners just to make the building so that it's, I guess I would say, regular. The proposed garage structure does have a larger portion of it within the 50-foot buffer zone. But again, we can't move that closer to the road due to the front zoning setback. Finally, there is a request for a waiver for the 2-foot separation distance to groundwater. Again, there's no other alternative for that. They're not proposing to put in full basements, but they do need essentially frost walls, which would go down 4 feet below the frost line to put the footings in, which would put those into the groundwater elevation on a temporary basis. And any dewatering that would be required would only be temporary. And with that, I'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you might have with the application.
Thank you, Art. Questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that this property has a pre-existing dwelling right almost up to the wetland line. But I don't see that as a justification for adding all the additional proposed structure so close to the wetland within the 25 or within the 50-foot buffer. Like especially the outdoor shower, I think that could be easily located outside of the 50-foot buffer. The proposed structure that abuts the shell driveway. I'm not sure, I understand there's a zoning setback there, but I think there potentially needs to be another look at the site and to see what they could do there. I guess I'm okay with turning what's right now a garage on the existing dwelling close to the wetland into an addition, since it's occupying the same structural footprint. But I am concerned and would like to hear the construction protocol on how that will take place, because by my estimation, that activity is happening, I don't know, only maybe 10 feet from the wetland. So hearing how that will be done would be helpful, please.
Thank you, Seth. Art, do you have any reply as to the construction protocol?
Sure. I just wanted to look, that portion of the work would be closer to 40 feet from the wetland buffer zone. We can provide, I wrote in the narrative essentially that we're talking about where the garage would be removed and the addition constructed. The portion of the new addition is about, the closest point is about 48 feet. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the infill on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, we can get you some more information on that. I mean, essentially, yes, we can get you some more information. I'm thinking it probably would just be a small block wall. They could probably even hand dig that, but I can get you information on that. There's not, I don't think, a lot to that piece of it.
Thank you, Art. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just To echo what Seth was saying, this is the classic death by a thousand cuts. And, as far as I'm concerned, if it's the 50-foot demarcation is pretty sacrosanct to me. So I'm not very sympathetic to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Joe?
I agree. We can't break that 50-foot line. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Yeah, just to clarify my earlier point, what I was referring to is that proposed addition labeled ODS. I understand relooking at the plan that where the garage is actually in a different space. So thanks for pointing that out. But again, I would like to see the protocol, but I agree with Commissioners Golding and Topham that this seems like too much structure within the 50 without an added or without a offsetting long-term net benefit.
Thank you, Seth. I have to say I agree with my fellow commissioners that have spoken that 50-foot no build is pretty important to us, and there's numerous structural elements that are going to be within the 50 here. So it would be definitely difficult for me to approve. Dave?
My sentiment's the same. The 50 seems to be getting attacked quite a bit lately, and I think it's something we have to preserve.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments from commissioners before we look to the public? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any public comment on this one?
No, you do not.
Okay.
Not at this point.
So Art, what would you like to do here? Would you like to go back to the drawing board a little bit and come back to us?
Sure. I would like to request a continuance to the 17th, please, and I'll discuss this with the applicants.
Perfect. Thank you. So this will continue until December 17th.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Troja Nominee Trust at 26 Easy Street. And this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application and notice of intent downtown, right on Easy Street on the way to the steamship. And the proposal is to remove an existing structure and construct a new structure. They'd actually be removing two existing structures. We're within the buffer zone to Coastal Bank, which is essentially the timber bulkhead that's recently been rebuilt on the land bank property across the street. And then the property in its entirety is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. What I did do was to show, just for clarity, I did two plans. One was the existing conditions and one with the proposed conditions. So there's your, thank you, Joe. There's your existing conditions showing the existing, three structures that would all be removed from the property. And then you can see on this particular plan that there is the property to the north was renovated some years ago, and there's I believe there's a jewelry shop there. That's what got the raised patio and the stairs. And our proposal would be essentially to do something very similar, where we would match that first floor elevation and continue that in working with them, continue that patio across. For right now, what we've shown is just work on our own property, which would be to essentially retain that area, to have the same sort of a raised patio and some steps up. We feel that this, we realize that there is the standards to be met for land within for coastal storm flowage, and that by essentially replacing the structures that are there now, which don't currently allow the floodwaters into them, this proposal is also for a solid foundation, so that it also would displace essentially, that's close to the same area that currently is already displaced. The idea here is that, as you're all aware, that this area is subject to inundation, and we believe that this is a project that it's important in respect to coastal resiliency, and that the structure, not be damaged in those sort of events. Given the level of development that exists in the same area, and on this particular property, we don't believe that there would be any adverse effect or impact as a result of this. And to put this in perspective, the area that we're talking about, this is a fairly small lot. I think I have the lot area on the other plan. Let me just bring that up. Which is, I'm sorry, I thought I had that. I believe it's around 4,000 square feet, but to give you, just a sense of that we're talking about a very small, limited area down here, replacing the structure that's there. And we also would have a ramp so that we could get ADA access to the first floor, because it would essentially be envisioned would be a commercial use, open to the public on that first floor, and other uses on the second floor. With that, I'd be happy to address, and of course, it's all served by town water and sewer. And I'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you may have with the application.
Thank you, Art. Questions or comments from commissioners? Joe?
I just feel that this is a good opportunity where this site is going to be disturbed, that maybe not have a solid foundation. Maybe this is an area where we need more ground surface, or maybe have the house up, the structure up on piers that would allow any flooding that happens in this area, that they'll have some area for this water to be absorbed. I think this is a way to correct a problem. I think that the lot next door should have the same kind of detail. And I really think that this is something we could help somewhat. I mean, I know it's a small lot, but should help some of this problem of flooding in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Seth and then Ian.
Joe's stealing all the good comments tonight, but I agree that we should think about a pile supported structure here. If you're looking at wanting to plan for coastal resiliency, having a pile supported structure makes way more sense than the solid fill foundation. I know it's envisioned as a commercial space and you have to deal with ADA and all the other requirements, but I don't see why any of those would pose an issue to a pile supported structure. Thanks.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm the echo chamber this evening because I agree with my fellow commissioners. And in fact, I was a bit surprised in the application, in the conclusion, that it said this is an application which adheres to requirements, because I don't think that it does. And so I think this is a good example of where it needs to take into account sea level rise and what's taking place downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I have to say, I agree with you guys. I wish we were seeing piers instead of solid fill. I'm pretty sure though, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, do commercial properties have a little bit of a different standard when it comes to the solid fill versus needing to be on piers in the flood zone?
Yes, they do. They definitely have a somewhat different standard of the building code. If you guys remember, a couple years ago, we did one of the inns downtown, I think on Water Street, where they ended up constructing on a solid fill foundation because they qualified for that under the commercial use. So I can verify that with the building commissioner, or if you guys want to ask for that information, it sounds like you're asking for more. We can get that confirmed if that would be helpful for you guys as well.
Yeah, I think that
Joe may know off the top of his head. So
They are granted to have some foundation space, storage space below that V zone or whatever zone we're in. Sorry, off the top of my head. But yes, they could have a foundation if they wanted to. But I think of this location, I'd prefer not to have that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I can't imagine wanting to store anything in a understory in this location because it's flooding so regularly. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
Not at this point.
So Art, what would you like to do with this one?
If I could, Madam Chair, I just wanted to respond to the one comment with respect to requirements, and perhaps that wasn't clear on my part. That was a reference to the building code, so that it was that the construction would meet the requirements, and that may have gotten crossover as related to wetlands. But I want to be clear that the intention is that the construction would comply with flood zone requirements for the building code. That being said, I've heard what everybody has had to say, and I don't, we wouldn't be proposing storage below, into like a sunken type of a foundation. In fact, it would be, an above grade solid fill and capped. There's several of them that have been built around Easton Street and around town. But that being said, I would request a continuance, and we will provide some more details and information on the foundation or a change, or just what is proposed, so that it could be better evaluated and discussed.
Thank you, Art. It looks like Joe has another comment before we continue.
Madam Chair, through you to Art. So Art, the new Harbor Masters building, they are on piers and they have a slab. I think it's a really good detail you may want to bring forward to your client, if you don't mind me. Not to design your project, but
No, I saw that.
Yeah.
The moat on the piles.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, if all of our comments and questions are out, Art will continue until December 17th.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 14 North Road LLC at 14 North Road, and this is represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. So since the last meeting, we've made significant revisions to the proposed project based on the commissioner's feedback, essentially shifting everything further to the south, further away from the coastal bank, including pulling portions of the main dwelling, that larger easterly structure outside the 50-foot buffer zone to the coastal bank, all the pool, patio, retaining walls also outside of the 50-foot buffer. We've revised the wooden decks that were between the 50 and 25 have been converted to stone patios. The only remaining structural footprint within the 50-foot buffer zone involves 23 square feet of the westerly wing of the dwelling, 2 square feet for 2 posts of a pergola structure on the east stone patio, and 4 posts on that, 4 square feet, and 2 square feet on the west stone patio for a second story deck. Cumulatively on the ground structures within the 50-foot amount to 29 square feet. And all of that overlaps with the existing structural footprint and or occurs landward of the existing structure. And to reiterate, all the topography slopes away from the coastal bank, and we are proposing to install dry wells to handle any runoff from impervious structures. So in summary, what we're proposing to do is relocate all the structures 39 linear feet away from the top of the coastal bank to increase that setback, removing 673 square feet of structure within the 25-foot buffer zone. And now we're proposing to revegetate 1,225 square feet of existing lawn area within the 25-foot buffer zone. And that area is highlighted on the site plan, and will be revegetated with native shrubs and some herbaceous plugs as well. Cumulatively speaking, there's a net reduction of 2,279 square feet within the 50-foot buffer zone of on-the-ground structure. And we believe the revisions will provide a long-term net benefit to the resource areas and provide an enhancement, improvement over existing conditions. And with that said, I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. I have to say, I really appreciate these revisions and the added revegetation. So thank your client. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the revisions as well, but when I looked at the plan, I just thought they're so close. I mean, there's been some creative planning and engineering and architecture here to get the structure as far away from the 50-foot setback as possible. And, you know, I may be off on my scale here, but it seems like all the applicant needs to do to get it completely outside of the 50-foot buffer zone is make a southerly vertical shift of 4 linear feet. Just move the structure about 4 linear feet to the south, and we'd be out completely outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. So given the size of the property, I just think that's possible. I'll defer to the engineering plans to tell me if I'm wrong for some reason, but it seems like it's definitely possible.
Thank you,
Through the-
Seth. Brian, do you have a reply?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, Seth. We did take a very hard, long look at what was feasible. And ultimately, what the closest structure, excluding the post for the pergola and the second-story deck, from the structural footprint of the dwelling, that west side of the proposed structure at its closest point is now 48 linear feet away. And to reiterate, the existing conditions is 9 feet. The only reason that we're unable to get that completely outside the 50-foot buffer zone is the way the orientation of the coastal bank comes in. It does creep a little bit landward in that northwesterly corner of the site. And basically the structures carry evenly across the lot in an east-west direction. So again, it's upwards of about 20 inches of encroachment into the 50-foot buffer zone. And I think as a whole, again, this is all occurs landward of the existing structure. And we're not proposing to, renovate in place. We're demoing that and moving everything further to the south and then restoring existing lawn area right up against the 25-foot buffer zone or within the 25-foot buffer zone. Whereas under existing conditions, there's a very narrow strip of vegetation along the top of the coastal bank. We're going to be significantly enhancing that and shifting everything further away to the south. The architects took a hard look at trying to get everything outside the 50-foot, and this was the max extent practical they were able to design. But at the end of the day, we feel that removing 2,279 square feet in the 50-foot buffer zone is a huge, significant improvement over existing conditions.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Joe?
I'm going to back up Seth on this one. I think that they can slide it back a little bit more. I mean, it's just a minor little tweak. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Mark?
Yes, I'm unclear. You said he can't move the western addition to the house there back 4 feet. I don't see why he can't. Could you help me with that one?
Brian?
I think from a design standpoint, they were unable to. I think this was we asked the question, and this was as far back in order to make everything fit and configure correctly. This was as far as they could shift it back.
Thank you, Brian. I think we run into this funny, like, human aesthetic design versus, what we should do for the environment. And I don't always agree with, designers needing a clean line at the front of the property, that they probably could kind of change that viewpoint. And I think in the future, as people start to recognize what we're doing to the environment, they're going to realize that human aesthetic of design needs to shift somewhat. Seth, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Brian, for the clarification. I'm trying to base the measurements off the scale listed on the bottom of the plan. That's how I got to the 4, but
yeah,
thanks for saying it's 2. And I understand that architects looked at it, and without them being here, it's hard to know exactly. I think some of my concern has to do with the structural element that's going to be below grade. That's south of the proposed house and north of the proposed guest house / garage. And I see that those HCC drawings were included, but to me, I'm not an architect, and without the architect being here, it's hard to know. I just think that there's some way to do something with that underground structure, make it a little bit smaller and move 2 feet south and still have the pretty much equivalent design aesthetic that the client wants, while maximizing the protection to the resource area by ensuring that structures are outside the 50. So I'll leave it at that, but that's my thought.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yep, Steve.
Yeah, on behalf of the applicant, I understand that it's always possible to just do less. And I think that's somewhat the wrong question here. The question here is the applicant doing a massive amount of improvement here? The legal question in front of you really is, what's the net benefit? And we're taking a structure that's within a couple of feet of the wetland and pulling it out of the wetland, out of the 25, out of the 50. The portion in the 50 is a very nominal portion in the 50. And the revegetation at the bluff is a benefit that we're giving up lawn. This applicant is giving up, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers that Brian did, but this applicant is really pulling back 99%, and I think it's not really fair or really the appropriate application of the Wetlands Protection Act for the commission to say, great, we'd like 100%. The real question in front of you is there a significant net benefit, and I think there is a massive net benefit with this application here, and I hope the commission would look at it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ultimately, we're really trying to help these applicants out too, in an area where we have erosion occurring, that we want their structures, as far back as possible, knowing that they're on a clock essentially until the ocean meets their homes. So I think it's, well within the commission's justification to ask you guys if it's possible to move the structures a little bit further. I don't think we would be doing our jobs properly if we didn't ask those questions and make those requests. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I don't ask this in a way to be argumentative. I think part of the issue here refers to trying to quantify what long-term net benefit means as it's laid out in the bylaws. There's unfortunately, not a whole lot of information about what qualifies and what doesn't, and it's the job of the commission to kind of determine that. I think making sure that properties get into compliance with the bylaw in terms of structural footprint within the appropriate setbacks is an extremely crucial part of ensuring long-term net benefit. I totally agree here that the applicant is proposing to do something beneficial for the wetland by revegetating the area close to the bank and moving structure. But I think it's a question of what classifies as long-term net benefit, and ensuring that when these applications come in, we're doing our best to really give weight to that definition of long-term net benefit.
Thank you, Seth. Any other comments or questions from commissioners before we give it over to the public? Oh, Joe?
Through the chair. Joanne, can you bring up the site plan, Don Brackens, and then just a clarification from Brian, if you could.
Yeah, and just to jump in, just for clarification purposes. So the HGC plans that we submitted are still being modified. They haven't been approved by HGC. So those aren't final, just for the record.
So I'm just curious, are we going, and I know this is, some of it's out of our jurisdiction, but some of it is, but just so I get a whole context of what's going to happen on this property. So you're saying from the far left where the mouse is all the way down to the proposed garage, there's going to be a subterranean habitable space. Is that correct? All the way up to the proposed house?
Yeah. Joe, do you want to maybe zoom in on the proposed view? Thank you.
Just so the first floor patio, all the way down, going down the property to the proposed garage, then going all the way from east to west to the far right corner where the driveway, proposed gravel driveway is. And then it says a limit of below grade foundation. So that entire property site is going to be excavated down 12 feet, and there'll be a subterranean
basement. Yeah.
Basement. All right. So I don't think that anyone really understands how much impact is going to be happening on this property. That's why I think at that point, can we get the 1% that Steve is saying that we don't want to give up? Can we just give that up? I mean, seriously, it in the grand scheme of everything that's going on this property, I think that 1% is really not a big ask. And if it's coming back and it's rolling down 3 or 4 inches per the grade, I don't think that view that they're going to be losing is going to be more than a quarter of an inch looking over the horizon of that bluff. So I just think and echo what Seth just said, I think it's for the betterment and roll it back and let's just do the right thing and know that going forward, we've done the best we can for this property and this site and, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for bringing up those points and for clarifying exactly where the subterranean area is. I think for the public that's watching as well, that's important. So thank you for that.
And to my, sorry, actually, just to jump in, I don't believe to my knowledge, that it's that basement is dictating above ground design structure so much. I think it's really just a product of that northwesterly subtle extension of the coastal bank that creeps a little bit more landward and has a weird angle point of that 50-foot buffer zone. And most architects like to keep that straight, even line across the structures. And it's just that one northwesterly small corner of the structure that nicks into the 50.
Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners before we open it to the public? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have public comment on this one?
We don't have any on the YouTube chat. No.
Okay. Oh, looks like RJ has a comment or question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is RJ Turcott from the Nantucket Land Council. Through the chair, I think this is probably a question for Jeff or Joe, but I'm watching the commission deliberate and I'm wondering why a project like this, when the structure is raised completely and then is going to be rebuilt elsewhere, is handled differently from an NOI where someone is just building for the first time? Thank you.
So, thank you, RJ. I think Jeff can probably take that. And it's different wavering is my assumption on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically when we've looked at kind of tear down and, reconstruction in different locations, I think we've always viewed it as obviously as new construction. But I think Seth kind of hit the nail on the head is when you're looking at the overall net benefit is, contemplating what current conditions are and what existing conditions are for what the proposed conditions would be. And if you're having that net benefit. And I think that's the question that they're trying to bear out, RJ, to be honest with you. And I think that's kind of in past practice with the commission is to kind of weigh those benefits for the project in totality from what conditions are on the ground and whether or not there's that net benefit that says, there's already an impact in place. We're moving that impact farther away. That benefit is grounds enough to grant the waiver to that performance standard. So I think that's part of the discussion that the commission's having. That's an excellent question.
Thank you, Jeff. Ian, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a building that is not entitled to statutory protection. And if it was, then I think we'd be having a very different discussion. And so the net benefit is essentially, if the building was being moved back in its entirety, we would be asking to have it moved back behind the 50. And with all the discussion that has taken place, I would like to see this brought back behind the 50. And I don't see that is particularly arduous for the new property owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Jeff, and then Mark.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to remind everybody too, is they're kind of contemplating what's happening, and I don't have the date of the existing structure right at hand. I just don't have it. But there is a requirement.
I do, Jeff. It's 1979. I have the GIS map right here.
Perfect. So even with that being said, is our regulations require for this new development within the proximity of the coastal bank that we have to have a specific condition that calls out that they're not eligible for coastal engineering structures going forward. So in any order of conditions, that would have to be included. So it doesn't sound like that original structure would have been entitled to statutory protection anyways. But again, it's something to think about that they wouldn't, going forward with the new structures, be entitled to any sort of coastal engineering structure protect them from erosion.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark?
I have a question through the chair for Brian, Madam Chair. You've lost my vote on this one, Brian. I sense some negativity on the commission's point. I'm wondering if you want a denial or do you want to revisit?
We will be requesting a continuance. Just if there's any other feedback, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so any other kind of final comments or questions for Brian? Looks like no. So Brian, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
2 weeks, please.
Okay, so this will continue until December 17th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that moves us on to request for determination. And we have Houlihan Swift Rock LLC at 28 Swift Rock Road. And this is represented by Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you. For the record, Ryan Maxwell, Bracken Engineering. This project's fairly straightforward. The BVW on site was previously approved through another order of conditions, which is mentioned on the plan. What the applicant would like to do is to expand the existing pool patio by 10 feet. And as you can see on the plan, the existing pool coping edge is 73 feet to the BVW. And after the 10-foot expansion, it would be 63 feet to the wetland. other minor components on this are the proposed bocce court, which is slightly inside that 100-foot buffer. And the applicant is also looking to relocate the walking path off of Swift Rock Road, which also slightly comes into the 100-foot buffer. That is it for this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, does staff have a recommendation for this one?
Yes, we're recommending the -3 to allow the work without a notice of intent.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to issue a -3?
Motion to issue with a -3.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mark?
I may have missed it, but I thought we had on the schedule a continuance from last week, 2 weeks ago, on the application from Lily Street, the potential non-extension.
So that's later in the agenda as a withdrawal. So we will be talking about that one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that moves us on to the Horchow Family Nominee Trust at 33 Cliff Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. So this RDA is filed just to confirm the wetland resource areas. We're gonna pull up the site plan. Okay, thanks. So I'll just give it a second. All right, thank you very much. So the property off of Cliff Road, at the minimally extending onto the property, the northeasterly portion of the property, and then off-site, there's a bordering vegetated wetland system shown in green here. And it kind of unevenly drops down at a few locations and rises back up slope as a result of some groundwater seepage. The base of that vegetated wetland is primarily a Phragmites wetland off-site. The flood zone elevation is elevation 7 that occurs northeast of the site. And because of the fact that that flood zone elevation does not intercept a slope greater than 10:1, no coastal bank exists on this particular property. So we'd only be looking to confirm the resource areas boundaries of the BVW on the property.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions from commissioners about this one? It's like, no. Jeff, what is staff recommendation here?
Yeah, we were able to review those resource area boundaries and agree with that delineation. Would recommend a positive 2A.
Thank you. Is there a motion to issue a positive 2A confirming the resource area boundaries?
So moved.
A motion made by Seth, seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian. And that moves us on to EPR RGH LLC at 119 Eel Point Road, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. I would recommend that you can probably take the next two together. They're abutting and have a kind of a consistent delineation, and that's what they're seeking. So I think that would be perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So,
And Madam Chair,
yes.
I'll be recusing on both those.
Okay, thank you, Seth. So we are going to hear the EPR RGH along with Scannell at 119R Eel Point Road, both represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. On behalf of both property owners, these are two RDA filings to confirm the resource areas on the subject property. Subject property is 2 lots on Eel Point Road. Addresses are 119 and 119R Eel Point Road. The resource area on 119 is a coastal bank. It is a property that's bounded on Nantucket Sound. You have a coastal beach. The bluff area in which you have a flood zone, it intersects that bluff, and the coastal bank rises to the top of that existing bluff area. So it's essentially the area that would be subject to regulation on this particular lot is a standard coastal bank. This lot also does have area mapped under NHESP under the Mass Endangered Species Act, but that area actually occurs along Eel Point Road and is outside of commission jurisdiction. So we're asking to confirm 119 Eel Point Road as a coastal bank. 119R is the same coastal bank that runs in an east-west direction. Again, similar to what happens on 119. We did have an area at the top of the coastal bank at 119R, which was windblown sand. It's depicted to the north of the property, southerly of the bluff, kind of where the existing beach stair or aluminum beach stairs are. And we sought staff's opinion as to the jurisdiction of that windblown sand and whether it rose to meet the definition of dune. I think we're of the opinion, and staff is of the opinion, that that area does not currently meet the definition of a dune, as there is no connection to the coastal beach and or dune located at the bottom of the coastal bank. So essentially what we're doing here is confirming the top of a coastal bank that runs along the northerly boundary of the property for both 119 and 119R. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. No work is proposed under this application.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners on this one? So, Ian?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, for Jeff, please.
Yes.
So what difference would it make to construction going forward if, new construction, depending on the definition that we come to here?
I think you're referring to if the dune is a dune or not, essentially.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so obviously with that and without the plan up there, is it would take the setbacks from, the 25 and 50 from whatever the landwardmost boundary is of that landform, wherever the dune.
So if you look at the plan, Joe, if you could blow up the area at the back of 119R. Okay, and you'll see there, Ian, you'll see where the it's labeled existing aluminum beach stairs, and you have that area that's labeled windblown sand.
Right.
It's that small area that jets out. So the plan that you have in front of you, I've shown that at a worst case scenario, which would be jurisdictional, and you'll see the 25-foot no disturb and the 50-foot no build. And yeah, if you look 119 where the 50-foot no build is, essentially if that's non-jurisdictional, it's about a 25-foot difference is, I guess, a roundabout way of getting there. It's a 20 difference between the 25-foot no disturb and the 50-foot no build. That 50-foot no build that I have on the plan would slide to essentially where the 25-foot no disturb is on the plan.
Right.
Thank you for screen sharing, Joe. That's a great question, Ian, because I'm remembering a proposal on the same kind of stretch of Nantucket that had a questionable dune on it, and I'm worried that we might be missing something here by not labeling these sand-blown structures as potential dunes, because I think in the future. Like they're trying to make dunes. They just might not be there yet.
Thank you. That's my point entirely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Jeff?
Yeah, I would just add, so when we look at that and kind of the guidance from DEP for dunes and connecting to the beach, and there's some pretty significant case law that actually happened on Nantucket through the Frost property, which is just down the way on Airpoint Road, about dunes and how those work, is if that dune, right, if that sand that's on top of that bank is able to kind of form a consistent connection down to the dune below, is it would be able to qualify right now. Again, this is just from my viewings in the field. It seems like that sand is able to accumulate due to the presence of the stairs and walkway. That area up top is a pretty much undisturbed buffer zone from the top of the bank. I mean, you can see the footpaths on the plan. The rest of it's just kind of wild vegetation, and this kind of naturally channeled the sand that's probably coming up the bank. So there is the possibility that if you revisit that site, if nothing happens in a year or 2 years or 3 years, that it could very well connect and become jurisdictional. But right now, I don't believe that that structure would meet the definition of coastal dune as DEP provides that guidance for that definition. It's very similar to we had the same issue with wind-blown sand, if you guys remember, in the last year on Washing Pond Road, where we had an accumulation of sand that didn't have that connection as well. So that's kind of relevant to this discussion. But I would definitely say that's, it's worth keeping an eye on it. If it does make that connection, it very well could become jurisdictional.
So Jeff, I have kind of a follow-up on that. So
sure.
If we confirm these resource area boundaries and in a year we feel like they've shifted, how long does this RDA apply for that we wouldn't be able to kind of change perspective on that?
So you would have it as a planning tool if something so significant came forward where you felt that the information or resource areas had so substantially changed that you'd have to condition something differently. Obviously, for any work that came in within jurisdiction, if they wanted to, construct a dwelling or a patio, whatever it was, would still require a notice of intent. And at that point, I think if we feel like the resource area has substantially changed to the point where there's new jurisdictional area or a change in jurisdictional area, we would certainly have to address that at that point. It's the very similar to if we permit this in the bank, the bank erodes 20 feet in the next year. Hopefully it doesn't. But if it did, we would have to, obviously, when we reviewed another application for construction, have to reflect current conditions that are on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Ian, I think you had a follow-up as well.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And it's sort of building on what you're saying, which is that I was thinking that under our revision of our local regulations, we were going to address this. And
yes.
So in a sense, obviously if revising our regulations is not going to be retroactive, so are we being boxed in here as opposed to in 3 months, 4 months time, we wouldn't?
Looks like Jeff is shaking his head no, but I think he can maybe speak to that.
Sure, I would say no. I mean, obviously, you're putting the RDA to verify those resource area boundaries as they currently exist. Again, if we get an application in through a notice of intent, we need to reflect kind of current conditions. And our typical policy for anything, whether it's coastal or vegetated wetland, is we try to have, wetland lines as current as possible, or at least current to kind of 6 months. Again, if it's something that it looks like it's drastically changed in that time from current conditions, we would certainly have whoever was providing that application reflect those changes. And if those jurisdictional areas have changed, then that's what we'll have to deal with at the time.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
Just so you know too, the plan that I provided to the architects shows the 50-foot no build off of the wind-blown sand, just as, I wanted to be safe on our end. So the plan that everyone's working with right now does show that, it's a 25-foot difference, but we've shown what you see before you is what's been provided to the designers looking at the property.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. All right, so Jeff, would you guys recommend a positive 2A here?
Yes, I think after our review, we would recommend a positive 2A for both properties.
Okay. Is there a motion to issue a positive 2A? Motion made by Dave. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries with Commissioner Engelborg recused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And that moves us on to minor modifications with Croquet Pitch LLC at 24 Westchester Street, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you tonight with a what I think is a very slight modification to the addition that was approved to the existing structure, and shown in green is what was approved and shown in red is what's proposed. If possible, it might be helpful to zoom in on that, if we could, Joe. I was on the fence, honestly. I thought that this probably could have been considered substantial compliance if it got built the other way, but I don't like to take the risks, and I would rather bring it to the commission before it got built. But the changes outside of the 50, you could see they shortened it a little bit from where it was going to the north, and they added a little bump out that sort of infills the space against the 50. And that's the extent of the modification. It's just making sure the final footprint that's being constructed is essentially blessed by the commission.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate you coming to us with this before the construction. I think that's the best practice we could ask for, so thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? It's like no. Jeff, do we have everything we need to issue a minor mod? All right, we get
Yes, you do.
thumbs up. Is there a motion to issue the minor mod?
Also move.
Motion made by Mark, seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have New England Development, Lot 3 Mariner Way, and this is represented by staff.
Yes, so if you guys remember, this was an amended order of conditions that we ended up doing last week, because when they had applied for the certificate of compliance, we had found that specifically kind of the brick parking area and the brick patio hadn't matched the original plan correctly, and had them come in to amend it. Their appeal period has run on that amended order of conditions. So now the certificate of compliance as built matches the conditions on the permit and on the ground, and we can now recommend the issuance of that certificate of compliance.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, is there a motion to issue the cert?
Motion to issue.
Motion made by Dave. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeff, for presenting that one.
No problem.
And that moves us on to Hans Dahlgaard at 33 Matticat Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. This was an order of conditions that was issued in June 2018. If some of you remember that this was an old horse barn structure on the property and paddock pasture land. what was approved was single-family dwelling, pool, patio, some buffer zone enhancement area, bioretention, and some subsurface infiltration systems. And everything has been designed or constructed in accordance with substantial compliance with the order of conditions. Actually, there was slightly less square footage built within the 50-foot buffer zone than what was permitted. It was permitted 123 square feet and only 107 square feet was constructed, which is a good thing. And the buffer zone enhancement area also slightly expanded and includes areas east of that dry laid patio. The bioretention area slightly modified, but that area and the entire buffer zone enhancement area is significantly planted with native shrubs, sweet pepper bush, high bush blueberry, bayberry, and arrowwood. I think at least somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 shrubs have been planted out there, and everything's looking great. And we submitted some photos to that effect.
Thank you, Brian. Jeff, I can see your hand up already.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, when we originally got this and kind of reviewed it, we definitely lucked out in the sense that we actually did this site inspection directly after we had that pretty significant rainstorm the other day, to give us a chance to see how water was sitting on the site and what was happening and what was going on. And when we kind of did that inspection, I think we were all, I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but happy to see that there wasn't any significant, pooling or runoff or sediment areas. The bioretention area looked to be functioning just as it was supposed to. The additional buffer zone enhancement area was holding water. The wetland on the property itself didn't seem to be, holding any more or any less water than the wetlands on the adjacent properties. And all in all, I think that buffer zone enhancement area with the bioretention turned out really well. The front of the property is serviced by a subsurface infiltration system on the front half. And so we weren't seeing any runoff come around. So I think with a little bit of luck that the weather helped us out with the site inspection for the conditions that we were conditioning for exactly. We were able to see that as it was constructed, it was really functioning well.
Thank you, Jeff.
And we're
Joe?
always supportive of additional buffer zone enhancement. So.
Yes, for sure. Joe, do you have a question or comment?
Just to comment on Jeff, I just think it's great that everything that we asked to be put in and the abutters were concerned about is working, and that's really a positive thing. So.
Yes, I agree. So if there aren't any other comments or questions from commissioners, is there a motion to issue this certificate? Oh, Jeff.
Sorry, we do, before you ask, we do have a recommendation for some ongoing conditions on this.
Okay.
Before you get to a motion, sorry to interrupt. Condition number 20, that no fertilizers allowed within restoration areas, and they need to provide an annual report demonstrating the amount of fertilizer used within jurisdiction. That same annual report for the photo monitoring of the restored areas. And then 22, 23, and 24 all relate to kind of the management of the pool. And then 25 is our lighting condition kind of related to the pool. So I think we're requesting that conditions 19 through 25 continue as ongoing conditions.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
Wrote with 19 through 25.
Going perfect. Is there a second? Seconded by
Second.
Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to orders of conditions. I know Jeff sent these out earlier, and it looks like we just have 2 of them that closed tonight.
Yes, I think we have Zabar and
Nestor.
Nestor. Yes.
So we will start with Eli Zabar at 47 Squam Road.
So I have kind of our typical invasive species conditions.
Before you get too far, Jeff, would people like us to screen share the orders, or are you fine looking on your own? Oh, we're screen sharing. Good. Awesome.
Yeah, so we had kind of our typical invasive species removal and restoration conditions that are there. I spare everyone reading all of them. And then the waiver request that's on the second page is kind of a short discussion on the vegetation management. Sorry, I just lost words. Oops. I do have a correction. Sorry, I forgot to. No, that is correct. Never mind. I thought I had a mistake in the permit overview, but I do not.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And Joe for sharing.
And not for nothing, since this was filed, we have heard over 100 notices of intent. So this has been a long application.
Yes.
Really for no reason of ours. So.
And we're just so busy that we are hearing notices like crazy.
Yeah. It was filed like 13 months ago and we've had over 100 since then. So it's pretty wild.
All right. So any thoughts from commissioners, or is there a motion to approve as drafted?
Move to approve as drafted.
All right. So motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Brian A. Nestor at 4 East Lincoln Avenue.
All right, so just to kind of go quickly, this was Ryan Maxwell's project from earlier for the relocation of the garage and then the construction of the dwelling in the flood zone. I didn't really have any additional conditions to add. It seemed pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Jeff. Any thoughts from commissioners on this one?
Great name. Constantina Pip Nestor. No.
If there are no comments or additions, is there a motion to approve as drafted?
Motion to approve is drafted.
There's a second. Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Like that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to extension of orders. 36 Lily Street LLC at 36 and 36B Lily Street. This is now a withdrawal, and I'm hoping staff will give us a little background on what we do moving forward with this one.
Sure. So I'll try my best, and I'll kind of explain why we're at a withdrawal here. I do see that the applicant's counsel, Sarah Alger, is here as well, who may also be able to help out with this because it's a little bit of a I don't want to say it's confusing, but it's involved. So during the COVID time period that we've been dealing with, the governor issued out an order, and I'm trying to bring it up as quickly as I can to have the correct text with me. Issued out an order on permits that's a little bit similar to the Permit Extension Act. I'm just bringing it up. Sorry. And under COVID order number 42, and I apologize for not remembering this last time or coming up, but this is the first time that it's happened, is Governor's Order number 42 essentially told all permits that were valid as of March 10th, 2020, going forward during the state of emergency. That's a little bit of a summary. So if your permit was valid as of March 10th during the state of the emergency, it wasn't possible for your order or your other permit to expire due to all of the restrictions involving COVID-19. So that being said, when you read through that, essentially what happens is your permit expiration date gets continued from when it would normally expire, the difference between that March 10th date and the date of expiration to deal with the Commonwealth state of emergency. So this permit by governor's order, or any permit by governor's order, would naturally be extended for that time period and wouldn't require an extension to be obtained for that time period going forward. So just by our quick math, when we reviewed it, it seemed to us that from March to November is about 8 months. So without the exact date right in front of me, that permit would be tolled for that kind of additional 8 months. Does that make any kind of sense to anybody? Sorry, it's dissimilar to the Permit Extension Act because it's not an act of the legislature. This was an order of the governor instead.
Yeah, so I think we have a couple of questions. I first need whoever is labeled as mostly east to identify yourself.
So I can do that for you. Mostly east is on for a later agenda item, but that's Deanne Atherton. So
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. It looked like Ian had a question and then Mark.
Well, yes, Madam Chair, and perhaps Sarah will chime in, but I don't see any reason why the governor considered it to be open-ended, and the limitation on actual construction was, I think, 6 weeks, but I could be corrected. And I wonder what town council would say about considering this to be open-ended from today, or from when it expired, to add another 6 or 8 months to it. I don't see any justification, and I would be surprised if there's a legal argument, but no doubt Sarah will correct me.
Well, I don't know if I want to correct you, but Madam Chair, can I address that?
Sarah, you can address that.
The state of emergency order, which is chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, provides in relevant part, and this is from section 17 B triple I, that a permit, which so is any permit, in effect or in existence as of March 10, 2020, including any deadlines or conditions of the permit, shall not lapse or otherwise expire, and the expiration date of the permit or time period for meeting a deadline or for performance of a condition of the permit shall toll during the state of emergency. We're still in the state of emergency, so we haven't yet even come to the end of the tolling period. We're currently at about, I don't know, 270 days, plus or minus. The term permit as defined in that act, the Acts of 2020, Chapter 53, is a permit, variance, special permit, license, amendment, extension, or other approval issued by a permit granting authority pursuant to a statute, ordinance, bylaw, rule, or regulation, whether ministerial or discretionary. So just like the Permit Extension Act, in a way, any permit that was valid as of March 10, 2020, has its expiration tolled during the state of emergency until that state of emergency ends. It isn't done permit by permit, it's just a blanket extension. So we're having to deal with this in a variety of contexts, and this just happens to be one of them. So in this particular case, let's say the state of emergency were to end on December 9th, just picking a date, that would add 275 days to the expiration date of November 29 and would bring the expiration date of this particular permit to August 31st, 2021. So our position is that we applied prematurely, forgetting about the tolling period for this permit extension, which is why we're withdrawing it. We'd like to withdraw it. We'll get the work done during the balance of the permit.
Thank you, Sarah. Jeff?
So just to kind of go to the town council question is, I know we've sent it off to them and they seem to agree, but we also confirm that tolling period and how it's being applied through Mass DEP. And they did confirm to us that it does apply in the way that Sarah just described, where it does extend all permits forward from the state of emergency from when the state of emergency ends.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark, I think you had your hand up, and then Seth. Oh, you don't want your hand up anymore? All right, so Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I fully understand the process that's been outlined here related to the emergency order, and I appreciate the withdrawal based on that fact, assuming that the order has been extended by those emergency orders. My question gets into a somewhat different but related issue, is that if we feel work on this order has been in non-compliance with the order, would we consider issuing enforcement action to bring the project back into compliance? And do we have the possibility to do that if we feel like something has been in non-compliance here?
Thank you for that question, Seth. I was wondering the same thing for Jeff, that once the extension is withdrawn, I think we do have grounds for enforcement on this site. But Jeff, can you clarify that?
So certainly. So just in general terms, this project aside, is the commission always has the ability to enforce any open order for compliance with the conditions or to protect the interests in the act or in the bylaw. So if we feel that there's activities that are going on or something that could be harming the interests, you guys absolutely have the ability to address that through the full force of the powers of the commission. So if you guys, we have the applicants here and the representatives. If you have questions specifically, I think they would be able to address those or answer those. And you guys could certainly take whatever action you feel necessary to protect those interests.
Thank you, Jeff. Sarah, it sounds like you have a comment.
Well, I just wanted to say two of the principals are here, Terry Sanford and Brad Guidi, and they are available to answer any questions. It's our feeling that we're currently in compliance with the permit, and we would like to continue to do work. We don't think an enforcement order is necessary, but if there are concerns that the commission has, we'd love to hear what they are and have an opportunity to address them.
Thank you, Sarah. There were numerous concerns brought up at our last meeting, including major flooding that's leaving this property and impacting land bank property. So I think that needs to be addressed.
I think we'd like to have an opportunity to address that now, if we could.
Yes, go ahead.
Brian, do you want to do that, or do you want Terry?
I can start with that. So this is Terry Sanford as the representative of 36 Lily Street property. So obviously we saw the letter from the land bank that came through at the last meeting, and I think was more formally presented recently. Frankly, we're a little caught off guard and surprised by it. The condition on the site, as evidenced by some of the pictures from neighbors and such, especially during the rainy season where there's, a lot of standing water at moments, is something that existed, before we submitted, with this process in Concom a couple years ago. Those aren't new conditions. The specific issue with the wetness on the easement the land bank has across the property to access the park is a known condition that they actually raised to us back in 2017 when we originally bought the property and said, this is an ongoing issue and would you be supportive of us trying to solve it? We said, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about what that looks like. We found out shortly thereafter that they actually had pulled a permit with Concom. I think that went back as far as 2011 to build a raised boardwalk across this area of the property. So, the idea that this is a new issue caused by our construction, and we should talk a little bit about the construction we've done and the timeline of that, because I think there were a lot of misinformation that came out in the last board meeting around that. I think it's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination. And again, the letter from Land Bank sort of caught us off guard. We had actually been actively engaged with them to sell portions of the property, to talk about when and how to do those improvements to that access point. So it's again, those are conditions that have been existing, that are documented both through the commission and in writing to us, really from almost the day after we acquired the property. So I don't think that's a new thing. That's been an ongoing thing for many, many years. And frankly, as best we understand what's been happening in the area and with the property, is that you've got a storm drainage system that basically services the whole neighborhood from Westchester to North Liberty to Lily Street, funneling runoff into the pond. And then there was a storm drain that ran through that easement. It's called the Lily Pond Ditch on a number of plans, under American Seasons, and tied into the storm system that discharges in the harbor. And DPW is very much aware that this system is essentially fully failed. It had been failing for a long time. And so, I've expressed this to anybody who's asked, that, our experience with the property is that the failure of that storm drain has really exacerbated the water issues across the site in the last couple of years since we acquired it. So just as it relates to the question about the land bank and their access and the damage, that's been our position. And I'm happy to talk, at length about, again, what the actual construction that's going on the site and what the timeline was, if there are questions around that.
Thank you, Terry. Would anybody else from your group like to add anything?
Yeah, this is Brad Guidi. I'm one of Terry Sanford's business partners. I think it's really important to note that we started construction on this in January of 2019. That's when we mobilized on the site.
2020, Brad.
I'm sorry, 2020, right? Not 2020. We mobilized on the site January 2020. We dug the hole. We were approached by the land bank to purchase through Eric, I believe in February. Terry, correct me if my dates are wrong, but we were approached by the land bank to purchase part or all of the property in 2020 to the land bank. Obviously, the land bank does not want structures on the property. So we did intentionally slow construction down. And then essentially we were shut down by COVID. When we came out of our shutdown from COVID, we were in the middle of what is going to be high season in Nantucket. And just like all our projects, we do not build in town. We try to respect our neighbors. So we did not build during the summer months. We resumed construction in October and have again been in contact with the land bank. We met them on site last week. They actually put an offer in on the property again. So we were very caught off guard by that letter. And I think the timeline is really important in why the construction is where it is. We are trying to work with everybody, and that is why construction was slowed.
Thank you. And, I appreciate your explanation of the slowing of construction. And I totally understand that COVID happened and you guys kind of got a late start on this permit. But we had photos submitted in our packet for our last meeting that showed foundations full of water in December 2019. So even if you hadn't started construction, you guys are still responsible for this property and any hardening you maybe did to the driveway. I know as a commissioner who sat on the original permitting here, I feel like whatever has gone on this site since it's been permitted has seemed to exacerbate the flooding. I know that's the perspective of one commissioner, but I was concerned with this property when we originally permitted it. And now that the evidence that's been submitted to us definitely shows increased flooding on this property. So that is something we need to address pretty seriously. before kind of moving forward here.
Have you guys looked side by side at the photos that were submitted with the original application versus the current photos?
I mean, I don't know that they've been presented to us side by side in that way. So if that's something you as the applicant would like to submit to us, you are welcome to submit that.
I think they were part of your records as part of the neighbor opposition to the original permit. But I just, you know, your supposition that the flooding has been worsened, I think it would be worth examining the before and after photos, because from our perspective, that isn't the case, or at least not in a substantiable, tangible, measurable way.
In addition, we haven't been able to actually.
Wait a second. We can't just like shout in without saying names for our record and our process. But again, it is on you guys as the permit holder. If you feel like you want to submit that information as your evidence with side by sides, to submit that as part of what's going on here.
Sorry, this is Terry Sanford again. So again, I think we're happy to present whatever information. I'm not aware that we are up against anything specific. This process started with us asking for an extension on the permit, and then realizing that it wasn't wasn't expiring yet. So again, we're trying to answer questions and fill in details here. So I didn't mean to be combative. I was curious if you guys had looked at it, because I watched the last meeting and certainly saw the tenor of the board and the concern. And, you know, obviously Brad and I are intimately aware to how the neighbors have felt about this project from the get-go, and the photos that have been submitted. But from what I've seen, everything's been consistent. So again, that's the only reason I asked the question.
No, and thank you. I appreciate that. But again, as a commissioner who sat on the original permitting and is now looking at the site, it seems to have exacerbated the flooding in my perspective. It looks like Rachel from the land bank has a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Erisman. This is Rachel Slosik from the land bank on behalf of the land bank. And I just wanted to mention that, yes, there has been existing flooding on the site. This is an area that we all know has flooded over time. The difference is that in the summer, it usually dries out. And this summer, when we experienced extreme drought conditions, and those are represented by groundwater being, feet lower throughout the island, we still had a saturated site. And so that was actually the change, is that the wetness continued through the season this year in a time when everywhere else was bone dry. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Brad?
Thank you. I think it's important to note that it is in the middle of the course of construction, and the rain garden, the stormwater management system, has not yet been installed. We were stopped, we were slowed down, and then we were asked not to work there for the past 2 weeks. So, I think it makes sense that there would be some rainwater there if the stormwater management is not in yet.
Thank you, Brad. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My issue with what's happened on this site is relatively narrow, but it has to do with sort of negligent or improper site maintenance that's resulted in issues to protected interests. I understand that there's extenuating circumstances with COVID, with purchase offers, but to me, to leave a partially constructed open foundation without securing it is extremely detrimental. Some of the interests we protect relate to flooding, they also relate to wildlife. And I wasn't there to see it, but it's been brought up in our testimony that a deer actually drowned in the foundation. I can't firsthand say that that is true, but that has been raised as part of the record. And I think that even if we didn't see as drastic effects like that, having this excess source of water is bad for wildlife in that area. It's potentially a detrimental area that they could fall into and can drown. And I think also that it has exacerbated the flooding. So I don't necessarily know if there'll be a problem on site in general once this project, or if this project is conducted as intended. I think that given the conditions right now, the proposed rain garden probably will not be sufficient to capture the flooding water. I raised this at the last meeting that I would like the representatives of that project to come forward with a more robust water retention system. That was why, in part, I was supportive of not having this permit extend. We're in an interesting scenario now where if the permit is valid, then what's permitted is what's permitted. But I would like to see us issue a somewhat narrow but strong enforcement order trying to get a stop work on this site so that we could clear up some of the issues related to flooding and wildlife protection on the locust.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
So thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that Mr. Sanford is here and Mr. Guidi, is here. As a former abutter and someone who's walked through there for decades, and as Mark Beal is also, a fellow commissioner has also testified, there has been a remarkable change in conditions there since you went forward with construction. So you feel that your construction is not responsible, and that you feel that the drainage system is responsible. I guess from my perspective, I don't know how one would go forward to prove one or the other. I feel it's a very unfortunate set of circumstances now, and it's been very inconvenient. And so, Jeff, if we wanted to stop work to try and address these issues, would we have any real legal basis for doing so rather than just opinion?
Jeff, can you speak to that?
I can certainly try. I mean, I think that's always the question with any enforcement is, the grounds that you're using and what sort of clear evidence that, something harming the interest is abundantly obvious to start that process. So I think that's kind of the rock and the hard place here, right? Is we're dealing with a situation where, I think people can see that there are things that are going on the site that, and this is the problem, that may or may not be related to the activities that are going on the site that are in the applicant's control. Some of it may be going on because of what's happening with the town drainage system, certainly, or there could be, something else that's going on, whether it's, the work that happened in the retention basin over on Gull Island Road across the way. That's been holding more water too. I mean, I hate to say it, but this area is fraught with water problems for all of Westchester and Lily Pond. And, I think this site kind of epitomizes that there's a lot of different things that are happening, and it's hard to put your finger on one for what's there. But I think that, all of these things have steps that can be taken to try to rectify and move forward and protect the interests. I know that's kind of a roundabout answer to your question, but.
Thank you, Jeff. I think Joe had a question or comment, and then Brian will go to you.
So the DPW director, Rob McNeil, said last meeting that he's trying to get, 5 landowners to provide him access so he can fix the drain. And, it seems like the neighborhood is pretty well organized if you start reading emails and letters, et cetera. So I'm kind of surprised that, they haven't granted him these easements so he can fix this problem. And I do think there is more drainage problems since this project started in December. So, I think that some of that needs to be concerned, or, maybe the applicant could have come forward and said, listen, we're having a little bit of problem, X, Y, and Z, like there's some concerns here. We're shut down because of COVID and we were going to stop because of the summertime. I think that some more communication should have come to us. And I understand that the application has been extended. That's fine. But I think we're trying to address a problem that's happening. But I do think that the neighborhood as a whole should come together and say, we have a problem in this area. How do we fix it? How does the land bank fix it, their part? And how does, Terry and Brad work together along with, some of the abutters to say, like, here's the problem. Let's fix it. Let's help the DPW. Let's communicate to him. I feel like when Rob was talking that some of his hands were tied. He knows it's a problem. He knows it's been that for a while. And I think we've addressed this a couple of times, up on Lily Street, et cetera. Not Lily Street, sorry. Going towards the other side of Lily Pond, there's been drainage problems. So it sounds like the whole neighborhood in this area should be working towards each other and not kind of, I get it, call us, let us know there's a problem, but at the same time, now step forward and say, all right, here's the solution. Let's grant the easements. Let's move this forward and start to fix this problem. And I do think there's some problems with the site, and whether, Seth said it's mismanagement, I'm not quite sure what's going on and what is that catalyst for that problem, but we know there's a problem. So let's just find a solution and see if we can move this forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Brian had his hand up, and then Rachel.
Well, I didn't, Brad, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on any conversations with DPW.
Yeah, we've been in constant contact. I'm sorry, this is Brad with Blue Flag. We've been in constant contact with DPW for the past year, and we have granted them access. We let them come on the site and do a test pit. We're told them they can have an easement down our way. They've been delayed with engineering, but we have been totally cooperative. And I think if I may, just one thing, we care as much as everybody about the water conditions on this site, if not more. And we, obviously, if we're going to build a home down there, don't want standing water as much as everybody else. We've been in contact with DPW last week about an inlet on the site and seeing if we can't drain water into that inlet. So we're going to move forward with seeing if we can't divert some stormwater through that. In doing so, we found that our neighbor is actually draining into that inlet and onto our site. So, we are actively working on trying to solve this. As much as everybody wants us to, we are not negligent developers. We care greatly about what we're doing. And I think we've proven that with other projects we've done on the island. We really do care. We met with neighbors last week. We've been in touch with the land bank. We've been in touch with the DPW. We are really trying. And quite frankly, we feel like our hands are being tied to actually move this site forward and fix these problems. That's all.
And if I could just jump in, Ashley, with some of the solutions of what we're proposing to do forward. Now, I touched upon this previously, but just to expand upon it, the open water in the foundation, the open foundation, again, we're going to pump that to a truck to take that offsite. That's not going to be discharged on site to exacerbate any flooding. Moving forward, as Brad was saying, we have an application in with DPW to dewater to the existing catch basin in the southeastern portion of the site that's abutting the garage. That's the last stop of this train of catch basins and pipes that go out towards the town drainage system. That's outside of flood-prone areas, and it's discharging flood waters or dewatered from the foundation off-site. And again, that's only going to occur for max 2 to 3 weeks so the foundation can be set. Once that foundation is set, these the open water foundation is going to go away, and perceived issues related to that flooding go away. Concurrently, or even beforehand, we're going to be installing the rain garden. And again, the rain garden is providing the compensatory storage for the fill within the land subject to flooding. That backs up off of that last town storm drain and extends onto the property. That is providing equivalent cubic volume of floodwaters being filled within the project footprint. I think it's too early or premature to say that that area is not going to sufficiently work until it's created and we have some baseline conditions to work off of. I think taking these steps immediately is going to resolve a lot of these outstanding questions or concerns out there. And, we're going to be continually coordinating with conservation staff. We know that there's a lot of eyes and ears on the site, and I could be working forward on doing this in the best care possible.
Thank you, Brian. Rachel, you had your hand up, and then Seth. Oh, Rachel, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is Rachel Freeman on behalf of the Land Bank. I wanted to address a couple things that Mr. Topham said and state really my concerns. So we are working extensively actually with Horsley Witten to look at possibilities for water retention in the lily pond and different ways of doing invasives management and a restoration project in the lily pond as a whole. As a component of that, we've been working with Rob McNeil to discuss the pipe, which has failed, headed towards Children's Beach. The DPW has plans or intentions or hopes of putting additional stormwater into Lily Pond. Our goal is to see the water that's going to leave Lily Pond, see that repaired first before any additional water gets added. It's all a numbers game here. But I will say that we're working together. I do know that Blue Flag has been in touch with Rob McNeil, and they've been completely open to working with him, and they have allowed him on their site to do test pits and things like that. I do know that right now it's just an engineering holdup, as far as I can tell, but the pipe has failed and has failed for many, many years. So I've seen designs back to the 80s where it was supposed to be repaired. So I guess if I had to specify the land bank's concerns, it's not, our goal isn't necessarily to stop the project. I don't think that's our intention. Our hope is that the water can be managed on their own site so that it's simply not impacting any other property. We are in negotiations with them, as they brought up, regarding purchasing a portion of the property. Whether or not that happens or not, it's still important that the water be dealt with on the property at hand. So I do have concerns about the rain garden being sufficient just because of how wet it is already right now. But I am open-minded to listening to other options or other ideas that might actually work to move this project forward in a way that wouldn't dewater onto land bank property and continue to saturate the area. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Seth, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few clarifications on my previous points. I don't have anything against this project moving forward either. I just think that there could have been, in hindsight, a little bit better operational procedure and order of operations here. It would have been, I wasn't on the board when the order of conditions was crafted. I would have liked to see the commission require the compensatory flood storage to be put into place before the structural elements were conducted. That might have dealt with almost all the issues that we're having right now. Unfortunately, due to the order that activities take place, we may be seeing exacerbated conditions of flooding on site that when the project is constructed as a whole might very well may not persist. It just it seems due to the order of construction that there's been exacerbated flooding in this area, and so I think that if the application is going to move forward, I'd like to see the compensatory flood storage be prioritized as quickly as possible as the priority number one for building, because I think that potentially will deal with some of the concerns here. But that being said, I do echo what Rachel said earlier about change in summer conditions. I mean, we weren't just in any drought. We were in a level 3 critical, or I think it's called exceptional drought now. We're at drought levels that haven't been seen in many years. So I think that if we're still seeing wet conditions on site when we have a weather season like that, that indicates that there's been some change in conditions since the permitting took place. Even if that permit was only from a few years ago, it may have satisfied the volumetric calculation of flood storage at that time, but these things change. So I think that we need the rain garden, the compensatory storage to be installed, carefully monitored, and then if we aren't seeing it do what it's supposed to do, we need to ask the applicant to increase or to improve that flood storage so it's actually doing its job. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. So I have a question, Jeff, kind of for you, because it's not my wish through this to completely stop your project. That's not like what I'm going for here, but my thought is that we should probably be issuing out an enforcement that identifies this exacerbated flooding, just in order to have them come back and amend their current order so that we can deal with this rain garden in a little bit better way. Jeff, is there another way to go about making that happen? Or is that not even a possibility?
All right, so that's a little bit of a loaded question, so I'll try my best to answer it, but it's something where if you guys identify something that's harming the interest, you guys have the possibility of issuing out an enforcement, 1 or 2. Everyone's here. You can simply just request that it be done or provide some information to update it to the applicants and kind of set a time deadline, and then use the enforcement as the tool to make sure that is met. And you could say, if we don't receive it by a certain date, the commission will have no choice but to order the work done through enforcement. So you can kind of go either way. You could do an enforcement right off the jump if you had the grounds for the interest, but I don't know. I think it's always better to try to keep all the parties together and working in a positive manner to solve the problem, and then have enforcement as the tool if things aren't moving as they need to, so everyone can kind of stay productive. And I think having, Terry and Brad both here and participating has been super helpful. I think having Rachel here to help participate and provide information from the land banks aspect is super helpful. And honestly, I think the party that's really missing in this discussion is probably Rob from the DPW, because I think we're putting the burden to solve a larger problem onto one spot, and I don't think we want to, jeopardize what the land bank is doing in the situation on a whole by looking at one spot. I don't want to hold up or would suggest hold up a project for a really big change to an area, but I think having a firm handle on what's causing the problems or the impacts is important to know what we need to condition to do or to do. Because to be perfectly honest, we could sit here and resize a rain garden, redo a rain garden and make it bigger. And if it floods again and the flooding is still what it was before that happened, we're back to well, what's causing it and what's going on. And I think there's a lot of parts here that aren't functioning correctly, and trying to get those addressed, I think, is going to be, kind of the key to solving the mystery here. So I think we're going to have everybody involved.
Thank you for that explanation, Jeff. That's helpful for me to know kind of what avenues we could go down. Sarah, I keep seeing your hand trying to pop up.
Well, I just wanted to address the rain garden because it's kind of frustrating. We were scheduled to put the rain garden in last week. And when we agreed to stop work, we had to cancel the rain garden work. So we're kind of going around in a circle. We'd like to go ahead and put the rain garden in now. I don't think we need an enforcement order to do that. We were prepared to do it last week. We'd like to get it back on the schedule and get it done as quickly as possible. I think we could commit to doing that before we do any further work. But we'd like to continue the work on the project because I think that's the quickest way to get past this problem.
Yes.
And stop the impacts, honestly.
No, thank you. I can appreciate that. I think my concern is just with looking at how much flooding there seems to be. And again, it's been mentioned the drought conditions we were in, that potentially the rain garden hasn't been sized appropriately for the level of flooding the site seems to be taking on. And that's where I'm thinking the amended order might need to come in. But I appreciate that you guys are ready and willing to put that rain garden in, whenever you get the go ahead.
Right. I also, if I could just add, think that it's not, as Jeff was saying, really fair to put on this applicant the burden of solving a problem for an entire area, part of which is caused by the town's own drainage system. And its failure, that doesn't have anything to do with this particular applicant.
No, and I can appreciate that. Joe, and then Jeff, and then RJ.
So I think the rain garden will help slightly, but I still think it all goes back to Rob McNeil and trying to get everyone together. I really think that's going to be the critical piece. The good thing is, I think last meeting, everyone's at the table. Everyone sounds like the land bank and, Terry and his group are trying to work together. I don't know, reading on live chat right now, one of the abutters has not been approached by Rob McNeil. So I don't know who wants to take the point on this. It sounds like it should be Rob, but at the same time, I think if he's overburdened with, some issues, then I don't know if it's a land bank and I don't know if it's Terry's group or someone needs to kind of run point on this. I guess the question now is, are we, pointing the finger at Terry and his group, but it's a much larger problem, and maybe it's not them, but since they've started, that's the problem. But I do know that, Rob McNeil said that they have trees and they have problems, and this has been going on for a while. Rachel, said that this has been a problem since the 80s. So I think that once you start and you strip off the earth and all of a sudden the topsoil, you start to notice a lot of these problems. They really become, very apparent. So I would like to say, like, can you do the rain garden and do you come back in 6 to 8 weeks and report and say, this is what's happening? We have some of the water has been dissipated from, over flooding or et cetera. We have the foundation capped and in place, but it's now the rest goes to Rob McNeil and the remaining people that have not signed the agreement to allow the town to fix that pipe. And I think all of us as a whole should be bringing this to the select board's attention and say, you need to finance this. This is extremely important. It's going to help out the land bank. It's going to help out all the butters. One woman saying that her basement finally flooded. Well, we don't know what that's from. We don't know if it's this project, what it is. We don't know what that linchpin was to cause that problem. So, but I think it all goes back to the town where they know this has been a problem since the 80s, that's been discussed and brought up. So I think that we all as a group, everyone sitting here now tonight, need to kind of, call us selectmen and write a letter and say, this is extremely important. We've solved a problem. And it's maybe something Jeff can put on his list the next time he's on the select board meeting, bring this up, say, this is a major issue. And, can you guys put this on the top of your list? And I know they have a lot of projects going on, but I do think that this is something critical. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And it absolutely is critical, but I'm thinking back to a property on Westchester Street where we had an application with DPW drainage going through it. And it really took the applicant pushing the DPW to make it happen on their property, and not that, it's on you, Terry and Brad, 100%, but it really was, that property owner on Westchester who had to take the wheel essentially to make sure their property got taken care of. So I know that you're trying to facilitate that with the DPW. That's not lost on us. So I appreciate that. Jeff, you had your hand up, and then I know RJ did.
No, I'm fine for now. I think Joe covered what I was going to say for some of that.
Okay, perfect. RJ?
Thank you, Madam Chair. RJ Turcotte from the Nantucket Land Council. We support the land bank's position and all of their concerns, and we also support some sort of enforcement action from the commission tonight. Totally, we understand that a lot of the flooding issues are out of the applicant's hands, but the bare minimum is keeping standing water off of the site while it's being worked on, and keeping standing water out of that hole they dug for the basement. And it's not being done, and that's something that's in their control. They're professional contractors. We understand that they have had a lot of issues between COVID and then not being able to build out of courtesy over the summer, but pumping that out occasionally and keeping standing water off that site, that's not difficult work. That's not rocket science. It's something that can be done and would probably alleviate a lot of the issues the neighbors are complaining about as well. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Brian?
Yeah, to what Joe was saying earlier, I think we can certainly provide some monitoring reports as we start to recommence the work out there. I just want to make it clear that the rain garden is not going to be a global solution here to the drainage and flooding issues within the area. It's a small piece of a larger puzzle that's going to take a multifaceted effort to resolve over a period of time. There's a lot of factors that contribute to flooding here, a lot of new construction, a lot of new drainage inputs going on. But as best as we can control the runoff and the dewatering on site, I think we have a good solution and approach to that. That's not going to exacerbate the ongoing flooding issues out here. And we'll continue to work cooperatively with the conservation staff and loop them in on all activities going on out here.
Thank you, Brian. Joe?
I just want to bring up, let's use my comment pond as an example when, it was extremely flooded and a lot of people's basements were up through the slab. And I think when they're going to take the water out of the foundation, I think that the other water is still going to come back around. So I don't have a one and done solution. So I think if the neighbors say that they've pumped out the foundation and the water's back there, it's coming back, just going to be the lowest point of the lot. So everything's going to trickle down and it's going to up. So I honestly think that pump truck's going to be there daily, probably in the morning, probably at the end of the night, leaving, coming back, trying to keep that water at bay so they can get the foundation in place. And then, like Brian said, it's going to be about a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks until that's gone. So don't think that you're going to see the pump truck once and gone. I think that you're going to see it numerous times on the site. But I think that that's what they're going to have to do to get the foundation in place, get everything form set, and do the right thing. But just don't think it's going to be one and done to any neighbors looking on. That water level is going to come right back. It's kind of amazing how you can dig a hole and see the pumps turn on and everything's been, being, either drained properly and filtered. And the moment you shut that pump off, all of a sudden the water just comes up. And so I think that, Terry and Brad know that this is going to be a detail that's going to be coming their way. And so, but this is more for the public that's going to be watching this, that's what's going to happen. It's not like, like I said, it's a one and done deal. It's going to be something that reoccurs quite quickly too. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. At this point, Jeff, do you want to read some public comment? Because it sounds like there's definitely public comment out there.
Sure, I certainly can if you'd like. So I'll just try to put them all together as I can really quickly. Sorry. So Sarah Noel McLean has a few, and I'll try to lump those together. So she says, if the permit is valid, then I would argue the current conditions have changed dramatically since they received that permit through their fault. They have increased the groundwater all around. They are not meeting the conditions set forth by the Concom. There is a swimming pool in the foundation that has been there for 8 months. And then she had a comment specific to someone's comment that said that only addresses the ditch, not the land bank property. Where will the water be directed while the DPW drainage is being fixed? They are proposing trucking away the current water and then a rain garden, but the ground is saturated and cannot handle more. I've had 4 feet of standing water in a root cellar last January that had never been there in 200 years. No construction has been done for 5 months. They worked on their other properties during that time. We have a picture of the dead deer and police report. I've never been approached by Rob and would certainly grant access to fix the drainage. And then she also says that the catch basin does not connect to the harbor at this time. And then the last comment is from Suzanne Forsyth, who is in a butter, and she has confirmed that they have given Rob total access and urged him to prioritize the project. So that is all of the public comment.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any final thoughts or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look for clarity as how we are going to proceed here.
Yeah, I think we need
can direct
to
us.
accept the withdrawal first, and then probably see if the commission would like to issue an enforcement, I think is kind of our other choice.
Do you want a motion to accept the withdrawal?
I think if we are ready and there's no other commissioners' comments, we are probably there. Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Okay. So that carried unanimously, and your request for an extension is withdrawn. And then I think we as commissioners need to see if, again, we agree that an enforcement should be issued to try and deal with this, what's being presented as exacerbated flooding. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, excuse me. As Jeff said, I would prefer that we had a meeting of the minds rather than actual enforcement. I would also like to say, however, that in my opinion, it seems unlikely that the drains just suddenly collapsed in the last few months. And so I take exception with Mr. Sanford and Mr. Guidi's blanket statement that they bear no responsibility for the buildup of water there. Because in my personal experience, as I've said previously, having walked through there for many, many years, I've never seen anything like this. And so whether or not it's the steel sheeting that has contributed to this, I really don't know. But I do know that it has changed since construction started, and it's been pointed out that it was a very dry summer. And so I would hope that we can reach a compromise going forward where this issue is dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Brian? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I think one of the contributing factors here, and I can't pinpoint exactly how everything's interconnected, but the basin, if we want to call it a basin at the corner of Westchester and Gull Island, I don't believe that has, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, really seen the amount of standing water it has over the last couple of years, and based on the activity and the cleanup that took place there. I don't know if there's some new drainage input into that area, but I have a feeling that that's the primary reason of increased flooding on some of these surrounding properties. And also what we're seeing when the pumps were on and the dewatering was taking place within an open foundation, that once the water was removed, water was seeping in on the north side, so closer towards the Gull Island Basin. So it's seeping out in that direction towards going from north to south. Again, I don't know exactly what the drainage inputs or what the change has really been there, but whatever prior condition prior to the cleanup of that area, I think that's what's changed a lot of the drainage characteristics out here.
Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Seth and then Jeff.
Yeah, my thought is that if the representatives of the project are willing to take our recommendations here and proceed in the way we've described, then we don't need to enforce an action right now. But I think what Jeff was saying, that if they don't do what we've asked, then keeping that on the table is fine.
Okay. I'm tending to lean that way with you, Seth, and I think that the applicant is now well aware that they'll need to communicate more with the Natural Resource Department when they are noticing increased flooding or having these issues, so they can be remedied. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this is one of the few projects that when they first kind of started and mobilized, I mean, we were doing kind of bi-weekly site meetings with them on site, and that's not something we normally do. But to me, it seems to make sense from everyone's comments. I think it would probably do us some favors, and I'm happy to help facilitate it, is to try to get someone from Blue Flag on site with Rob and with someone from the land bank, and to go over, what's happening with the water, and having some sort of, kind of agreed to plan that has some sort of agreed to, monitoring for if there are issues and what's going on, and the triggers to say, hey, we have to stop, or it's working, and everything's fine. And I think getting the site back into some sort of, more natural, stable condition is something that's important to do. And I think if everyone kind of gets together and is willing to kind of make that happen, I think that's something that we're happy to help facilitate if the commission is happy with that. So we know exactly what's going to happen with all of the water, with all, kind of the major parties that are involved, that how we're going to assess whether it's working correctly, and everyone kind of understanding what everyone's part is in that. We may not get to any agreement, and I think that's where the commission can step in. But I think that would be something that would probably behoove all of us to try to do to move this forward, and agree getting some of the on-site drainage kind of squared away, but with a long-term goal of having a better approach for Westchester Street and the Lily Pond that is a much grander scheme than what is happening at 36 Lily Street.
Thank you, Jeff. So would that mean, would we put this on as a later discussion item to update the commission about that conversation with the land bank and DPW and Blue Flag, or can we not have an open permit under a discussion item?
No, you can certainly have an open permit under a discussion item. I mean, that's certainly something that you guys can discuss, any permit as opposed to the agenda item at any point, whether it's this one or any other permit. We do it all the time. So okay. We can certainly carry it forward as just kind of a project update, if people are interested in what's going on, but trying for, us to help kind of be the hub to the wheel to kind of make some progress that everyone is comfortable with.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth, you had your hand up, and then Brad will go to you.
I'm all set. I had the same question as you.
Okay. Brad, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, we are 100% willing to work with all the parties involved. Again, we met with the land bank right before Thanksgiving, and we will be willing to do so again and again, and bring DPW in to try to solve this problem for all of us. And honestly, it's like I've said, it is our responsibility. I don't think anybody is denying it's not our responsibility. We have to deliver this site to the way it was, and that might not be all of our Blue Flag's problem, as Brian noted, but we will do our best. And I think we've proven that on our other projects, and we try to do the right thing over and over.
Thank you. So at this point, if there are no other comments or questions, we'll essentially table this for a future update under a discussion item. Does that sound good, Jeff? Oh, Joe?
Should we set a timeline, like see you in a month, and just give us an update? And I think once some things get in place, then we can kind of relax and say every 3 months, or I'd kind of like to see how quickly things get mobilized.
Jeff might have some perspective on setting that up.
I think it's important, especially given the timeliness and obviously everyone want to kind of get work going, that I think we should probably just carry it forward to the 12/17 agenda. And I feel pretty confident that we can get all of the relevant parties at least set up and have a timeline kind of set to have all of that by then for an update. And if we've made more progress by then, I think that we'd have that to report. But I think the sooner the better for at least making sure and having check-ins for that going on. And I don't think everyone that's on this call right now has to necessarily be at that meeting. People can have a representative or someone, but I think we can try to have a significant update by the next meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe, do you have a response? And then Brad?
Yeah, sorry, Brad. Can we get Rob McNeil here next time, please? For these, I think he should be part of these discussions.
Yes, we have some other things for Rob. His notice of intent is on for next time too. So I think we can try to get him to be here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Brad.
Thank you. Brad, go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to say we'll do our best to mobilize quickly. Obviously, we were on Toscana's schedule, and so now we have to get back on it. We committed not to work for 2 weeks, and we are obviously entering the holidays. So I just want to be realistic that we are at the mercy of subcontractors. But our first call tomorrow morning will be to Toscana to get back on the schedule to get the stormwater work in place.
Thank you, Brad. We appreciate that. So at this point, we will continue this to a discussion item on the December 17th meeting. And I thank everybody, all parties, for being here and participating. I think it's important that everybody had an opportunity to share their voice here. So thank you. And with that, we will move on to other business. Approval of minutes from November 19th. I know the minutes came just a couple of days ago, so I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to look over them. I know I noticed, Terry, if you're there, one typo on the last page where you had intended to write Sam Kefferstan, and I think you wrote same Kefferstan, so there was just a typo on his name. But I don't know if everybody else had a chance to look, or if we need more time to look over those minutes. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there were a couple of minor items on page 11 when we were discussing about seeking town council's opinion, and at the end of that, towards the bottom of page 11, it says Golding wants an extension to be contingent on town council's advice. Actually, I wanted the whether or not to continue the discussion to December 3rd to be contingent on town council's advice. I'm not sure that it's very important or whether it's moot at this point. And then on the final page, where I said there are a number of aspects we didn't discuss about our regulations, extend the 50% restoration. It was actually sort of adjust because I want to reduce it. And again, and also bulkheads with pre-78 houses. I actually just said 78 houses because I was thinking more post-78 and the whole issue of bulkheads. But I just would like to thank Terry for the sterling job she does in deciphering all this. So it's very minor stuff, I would say, from my point of view. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, I agree. And a 5-hour plus meeting, she just does a great job of documenting everything that's been said. Terry, I don't know how you do it. Seth, you had a comment?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Terry, as always. On the last page of the minutes, page 12, under the commissioner's comment, B for Engelborg, it says, I'd like there to be a discussion about no more than 50% disturbance within the 25 and 50-foot buffers. We already have that provision. The provision I was referencing is opening up an expanded discussion about total disturbance within the 100-foot buffer. So between the 0 and 100-foot buffer.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts on the minutes? And I don't know, Terry, are you able to amend those so we can approve as amended, or should we carry it over?
Why don't you carry it over? And everybody who made comments, jot it down somewhere and either email it to Jeff or Joe to forward to me or email it to me.
Perfect. Thank you, Terry.
And that way I know I'm getting it right. Right.
Thank you for suggesting that. So can the couple of us who've commented email Terry or Joe with our changes? And then we will carry over the approval of minutes to next meeting. And again, Terry, we're just so appreciative of you. So this, this moves us on to reports. Crack.
So we had a very interesting presentation last week from Arcadis, who are the ones who are actually are doing the RFP for the Coastal Resiliency Plan. And Vince Murphy sent around a couple of links, which I'd like to forward to Jeff. So if commissioners are interested, they can open the links and check it out.
Thank you, Ian. That would be great if we could get forwarded that information.
Yes, certainly.
CPC?
Nothing to report.
Nothing. And NP and EDC is not here today. So that moves us on to enforcement update. Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
Yes, I saw that after I started talking. As it happens, it's 7:48. So I'll try to be brief. We've been moving forward on some other ones, but we do have a new one. And if you'll indulge me for 1 second, I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see it. Let me just get it correct. So this is 27 Washington Street. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
So you guys might recognize it. It's the house on Washington Street next to the town pier parking lot, and kind of across from the Rye Mitchell Aquarium. It's that house that's set way back that has the bright orange trim on it. If people are familiar with it. But there's this little vegetated pocket wetland that was there. And kind of over the weekend, I was driving through town and saw that all of the soft rush and everything that happened there was suddenly not there anymore. So I issued out something that was there, and I'm just hoping that you guys would be willing to ratify the enforcement. I don't think it hasn't been grubbed, but it looks like it was mown or cut. But would just like to get whoever that is in there before any other further work can occur. to just make sure that it doesn't happen again, and we can put some safeguards in place to do that, because it was it's a nice little well.
Thank you, Jeff, for noticing this. I actually, last time I left your office after signing permits, when I drove past that area, it looked like there were workers going back there. And I thought, oh, does that house have a permit? Do you know if they're like doing work on the buildings back there that also needs permitting?
I don't know. I honestly, I haven't physically gone on the site. I usually wait if we issue out enforcement to make sure that, we get the green card back before I trespass, because that kind of opens the door for that. But this was pretty obvious. So they may be doing work on the building. I'm not for sure. I'll probably reach out like we do with any enforcement to Plus and to Health to see if anyone has any other outstanding permits or any other issues of enforcement for the property if there's something else going on, to kind of coordinate that. So I'll definitely report back. I just wanted to get it to everyone's attention and make sure that we had that enforcement action out.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff? Seth?
Yeah, the one thing I know about that wetland is, although it is nice, there has historically been purple loosestrife in that area. And we might have gotten lucky given the time of cutting. But sometimes those plants can be persistent with seed heads. And I really hope they didn't disperse those seeds into surrounding areas. So I think we're gonna have to monitor that going forward to next year. And if they did have to issue a secondary enforcement on the basis of spreading invasive species.
Yeah, well, it may be something that we can just order that monitoring and management to be done through the enforcement action. But I totally agree. I know we've seen it on the kind of the town properties. It's been looked on at times, and I've definitely seen loosestrife in there before as well. So good point to carry forward.
Yes, definitely. If there aren't any other questions, is there a motion to issue out the enforcement? Motion made by Dave. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Airstman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that enforcement is issued out unanimously. Again, Jeff, thank you for being on top of that. And that moves us on to discussion of SBPF 77 through 122 Baxter Road and 65 through 67 Baxter Road. And we have questions from Deanne Atherton, Rick Atherton, and Burton Balkind about this. And Jeff has his hand up, so he can start.
I'm going to cheat while they're coming on to the camera and getting off of mute. So also with their questions that they're going to bring up about this, Deanne also sent in some comments that we'll distribute to you guys either tonight or tomorrow morning in regards to the existing GO2 system that's permitted under the SC 48, 28, 24. Those have been exposed, and they had some questions in regards to how we're monitoring whether or not, how long they're exposed and when the maintenance schedule kicks in. So we'll make sure that that gets distributed to you. And I did apologize. I said it was Deanne that was coming on, and it was actually Rick. So they share an email address. So I got tricked. But I'll turn it over to them.
All right. Rick,
And Rick, your YouTube is on. You might have to mute your YouTube, or else it's going to echo.
Yeah, I think Rick, Deanne needs to mute her computer so we don't hear YouTube playing.
I did apologize. I said it was Deanne that was coming on, and it's actually Rick. So they share an email address.
Rick, can you hear us?
I'll be getting out of here.
Yeah, get out of my way.
All right, Rick, I think you have the floor now. Deanne might actually still have to mute or close a door or something. There we go. So, All right, so Rick, you are clear to ask your questions.
Nope, I think you're in charge, Deanna.
It's your upper right. Just turn your volume up.
I
On your upper right, I have to turn mine off.
Okay, I did that.
Are we gonna have to send
Sorry.
an IT person to your house? We can.
Yeah, could you send a couple out here?
I'll call Alvarez.
I'm not sure if I'm there.
Clear to ask your questions. Yeah, so Rick, I think you might actually need to close your YouTube window.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I did that.
Great. I think you're good now.
Now he's muted.
Now we can't hear you. You've somehow muted or frozen. I think we might be frozen now. Oh, technology. Oh, here we go. Rick, you're unfrozen.
Rick, come back.
Oh, between managing tech issues with students all day, it's just tech issues are so big time right now with COVID.
That's why I don't touch anything. Once it's going, I let it run.
So Jeff, were there any written questions from Rick or the Athertons that we can maybe start reading while they figure out the tech?
I am looking for those from my email right as we speak.
Thank you. Dave?
Was Burton gonna comment? Maybe he could start before Rick.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be on our Zoom meeting right now.
So I'll try to summarize because they sent it in, and I apologize. It's from a little bit longer ago. They had some questions about the sediment that was delivered to the arrays further to the south, since we haven't had any sediment delivered onto those core installations in quite some time. And we had spoken to NECO and had been dealing with that. They were inquiring as to the current status of that.
Okay. I feel like we should wait for them to get back on before we discuss the current status.
If you'd like, we could move on in the agenda and come back.
Yeah,
if they make it back on. Or if they don't make it back on by hook or by crook, I'm happy to contact them to try to get that and get at least an email update to the whole commission. And then we can discuss it a little bit more. Oh, he's back in the waiting room on the 12/17 meeting.
Okay. Let's see if we get in now.
Can I just ask one question?
Joe, yeah.
So where's 115 and 117 Baxter Road, that enforcement?
That's the one where they cried to move the house.
Yes.
So we have sent that out. Let me just think. Have we received the return receipt from that?
See if we get in.
Can I just ask one?
Yeah, so sorry, I was just confirming with Joanne. We have received the notice that they received it, and they had a consulting firm.
They cried to move the house. Rick, I think we still have YouTube on.
We have sent that out. So we were contacted by a consultant that they've hired to start to try to resolve those issues. And we've discussed what those issues are to them, and they are currently preparing their response to that. So hopefully we'll have that written response from them by the 12/17 meeting, which is right around when their deadline for filing that information for us was.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. What about the Frables while we're waiting? How are they doing?
We've sent them a number of citations at this point. So I'll have to follow up with the clerk to see if they have been paid. And at some point, we have to file all those with the police as well. At some point, it's going to roll over into a criminal complaint. So I'll track with them when that threshold is met. I will double check with I think Detective Witherell is the one that will be responsible for that. So I will double check those dates with them.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
And may I ask, Madam Chair, about 71 Baxter Road? Where they've blocked off the public access, and any news there?
Yep. So sorry about that. I have too many enforcements. So they have also received their information, and their property owner specifically contacted the office as they were supposed to. We discussed the violation with them, and they have engaged a professional to come forward and help rectify that situation. So we should have that for you guys shortly as well.
Thank you, Jeff. And Rick, I think we can give it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Maybe to back up for a second on this, this all started, of course, with the delivery of what appeared to be and what was eventually determined to be some contaminated sand. And we had a discussion about whether that initial delivery was meant for the current geotubes or for the core bag installations to the south. That led to a discussion of who was responsible for the installations to the south. And at some point, Steve Cohen said that the individual property owners were responsible and SBPF had no responsibility. And there seemed to be a difference of opinion when the representative from Netco appeared and others. My recollection is reasonably clear that Jeff or somebody was going to ask town council to help determine responsibility for those projects to the south. And we have heard, and I'm not sure you have heard, any answer to that issue. I think one simple way to deal with this, in addition to asking town council, is to simply compare the notices of intent for the current geotubes and those projects to the south and the orders of condition on the first page, and see if there's any difference, so that if there isn't, and SBPF is the applicant for the order of conditions, or excuse me, the applicant who was approved for the order, and the applicant on the notice, it would seem to me they have responsibility. If there's some other determination, I think we're all looking to be clear, because I think eventually in the longer term, this is an important issue in how the Conservation Commission, in how the town of Nantucket, and eventually the community deals with hard armoring on the eastern end of the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Jeff, I think we've discussed this, but I don't know that we've discussed it as a whole commission. Do you know exactly what town council's perspective is on SBPF's responsibility for those open orders? Looks like he's looking.
Sorry, I'm opening something up on my computer really quickly, that my cheat sheet for this.
Madam Chair, and
yes,
didn't the Netco representative imply that SBPF was actually responsible?
Yes, the NETCO representative did, and the orders of conditions we've seen, to my knowledge, do list SBPF as the applicant.
Exactly.
Joe?
Yeah, I thought the Netco representative was trying to get as far away from this project as possible. So, but I get the applicant, but I have a problem with the provider of the sand, the distributor of the sand, the administrator that's watching the sand go over the bank, the operator on the beach. I think it's a whole chain of command that broke down. So I can't. I get it. It probably goes to one person, but I have a problem with everyone. And I think when I first got on this board, I had a problem that it was only going to go to the applicant, and I just have a problem. I think the contractor that is doing the illegal work or putting sand that's not been compatible on the beach, I think that they're just as much as at fault, if not more. I think that if you hire someone to build you a house, you've basically looked at their specs, you put a lot of ownership and trust into these people to do the job. So I just have a problem pointing the finger at one person. I think it's a group. I can't just say it's like one person that's causing this problem. Netco did the same thing up the beach where they put those 4x4 posts, and they basically didn't want anything to do with that. And we set a violation just to the homeowner. And I have a problem with that because I feel like that Netco should be brought in front of us. And I think that they've done nothing. And meanwhile, Steve Cohen and SPPF have come through, and we brought them forward, and they've came and they brought representatives and they brought in their information. We've had them do testing. Netco has done none of that and has been hiding behind this whole shell of SPPF. And I have a problem with it. I really feel like, the guy, the representative, the foreman for the site, we know he's supposed to be dumping 5,000 cubic yards per year over the bank. He was also saying that it's $100 a yard. We don't want to pay $100 a yard for sand. And I'm like, we didn't bring the application to you. You brought it to us, and this is what you're required to do. And this is annual maintenance that was not done. So this is where I have a problem with Netco, and I'm not going to allow anyone to push them aside and just put one person in front of us, because I don't think that's the way it should happen. I think that the contract should be standing in front of us. I think Netco should be standing in front of us. The applicant should be standing in front of us saying, we trusted these people, but it's our property and this happened. So I really have a hard time just trying to point the finger at one person. And so I'm gonna, if it keeps going that way, I'm gonna keep bringing on all these other parties that are involved. And when I first got on, I remember there was a group, and the homeowners, the husband and wife, these 60-year-old people said that they put on the wall on top of the bulkhead, and I'm like, there's no way these people were able to construct that. That's way beyond anything that these people could do. So some ways I think that the husband and wife team were trying to take one for their contractor, and I get that. But at the same time, I have a problem just going to one person for this violation.
So, Joe, I don't think they're necessarily trying to nail SBPF for these violations. I think we all agree that both contractors, property owners, permit holders all need to be involved in this. I think what's happening here is we're recognizing a larger issue where there are numerous open permits and nobody's taking responsibility. So we're trying to get all the people who are potentially responsible. So if it's not just Netco, we need to get all of the entities in this area together. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. I don't disagree with you. Netco did seem to just want to totally lose all responsibility here. But I think having a clear permit holder will help us fix this issue and allow us to maybe enforce against Netco as a contractor in this case.
So I can definitively answer that question for you guys, not to interrupt, but so it's important, and I apologize for missing it before. And I know when we talked to council about it, there's actually in the standard order of conditions that exists, and it's been in for quite some time. In the most current version, it's number 16, and it's not in conditions that we look at very often. So it's part of the general text that comes in. There's a statement that says, this order of conditions shall apply to any successor in interest or successor in control of the property subject to this order, and to any contractor or other person performing work conditioned by this order. And I think why that's important is obviously if you're the contractor, you have to maintain to the conditions. If you're the property owner as well, but the applicant is also associated with it. They're the person that has directly applied for the permit, right? So I think the easy way to compare it, and I know this was the comparison that I got when I spoke to both DP and council about this, is if you're a contractor and you apply for a building permit, you're putting your license onto a building permit application. You're attaching yourself to it as the applicant, and the property owner may be holding the permit by the property and by map and parcel and by street address and however else they want to identify. But that applicant is also on the hook for the conditions of those permits. So that applies in this case too, is if you sign the notice of intent as the applicant, as the property owner, you're responsible for the permit that was delivered. And when you look at the permit, and interestingly enough, when we talked about it, is when you apply for a notice of intent, there are 3 names that are on the notice of intent. There's the applicant, the property owner, and the representative. And those 3 people provide the information and sign the notice of intent that they are going to provide true and accurate information to the best of their ability, right? That's the kind of a really heavy paraphrase. When we issue out an order of conditions, interestingly enough, the applicant and the property owner get carried onto the permit, and the representative disappears because you're obviously, if you've hired an engineer outside of the stamp plans that may be there that they're responsible for, the other conditions of the permit, they're not necessarily responsible for, but the applicant and the property owner still are. And it runs with the property. So it's something where even if you're the applicant and the property has changed hands, you're still somewhat responsible for the conditions on that permit. So you don't get away from it because you just don't want to. That doesn't work like that. If you wanted to do that, you would be the representative of the project, facilitate getting that permit, and then the responsibility would solely be on the applicant and the property owner. So that's kind of how that functions, and that's the general the general advice that we got. DEP agrees with that assessment. So when we issue out an order, if your name's on it, you're responsible for it. If you're a contractor that gets hired to do work under it, you're responsible for doing it. That's, again, property owners don't necessarily always control what contractors are doing, and if they do something outside of the order, that contractor also needs to be held responsible for it. So that's kind of the guidance that we have recently gotten, and reminder that condition of the current orders exists, that all of those parties are responsible. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit better.
Thank you, Jeff. Rick?
Yeah, just to be clear, I think sort of trying to parse what Jeff just went through. A number of parties may have responsibility, but that does not alleviate the responsibility of the Wisconsin Beach Preservation Fund as the applicant. And that's essentially what I heard Mr. Cohen claiming. And this may seem like a fine distinction, but I think it's important to all your dealings with any applicant on any project, or frankly, Joe, in the architectural field, the Historic District Commission, and dealing with owners, architects, contractors, subcontractors, wallboard installers, and everybody else. You get into a very difficult chain of responsibility. And normally the easiest way for a regulatory agency to deal with them is to hold the primary party responsible and have them make sure the other parties involved in the overall project toe the line. If you want to call them all in, as we did Netco, that's fine with me. My point is, I still want it to be clear that the comments by Mr. Cohen that SBPF had no responsibility for these projects because it ran directly to the landowner, and they're signing on and receiving the order of conditions, had somehow didn't hold them with any responsibility. I think that's what I heard him say. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Jeff, is the town of Nantucket the landholder for all of these, or are some of these on private property at this, for the southern end of this?
The easy answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit of both.
So I think we are like kind of at the point out in Sconset that we maybe need a representative from the town as landowner out there to actually attend one of these meetings and try and parse this out, because I feel like ultimately it's the landowner who's going to be able to put the hammer down and fix what's going on out there and make sure that applicants and contractors are doing what they're supposed to do. And up until this point, we really haven't seen, I think it would probably be Libby Gibson who would attend, but we really haven't seen any move from the town to deal with what's going on their property. And I see that as the only way forward through this. Jeff and then Rick.
I'll let Rick go first.
Just to, again, we're dealing with a difficult set of circumstances, but I think it's important for the commission and the town to understand that if the proposition proposed by Steve about responsibility for the southern projects is, I assume there must be some difference because he didn't say that about the existing geotube project. So there's a distinction between the projects that I think we all ought to understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. I think the distinction is that SBPF as an entity is currently paying for and managing the current geotube structure, where the other projects they applied for but have given over management to the individual property owners behind each one. So they're not actively paying for what's happening down there, even though they were named on the permits, is the way I kind of think it's gone. Seth had his hand up, and then Joe, will go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you said the process right from my recollection as well. It seemed that their supposition was that they assisted with putting the permitting into place and then were hands off since then, versus with the GO2 project, got the permitting and have carried through with the maintenance, monitoring, finances to this date. That being said, I think that there might be an operational difference in the two projects, or the several projects, but I wholeheartedly agree that if their name is on the permit, they might not think they're involved, but legally they're involved. So we need them to be at the table, as well as the landowner and the contractor.
Thank you, Seth. So Joe and then Ian.
So I was stealing Seth's thunder in the beginning, and now he's stealing my thunder. No, Seth said exactly what I was going to say. So yeah, nothing more to add. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Ian.
And so technically, they're not in compliance.
The
Everyone.
yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, those Netco projects, we've never remedied what happened out there.
No.
Yeah, everyone kind of bailed. I think that's the problem that we're trying to get at, is no one was accepting the responsibility to rectify it.
And I think that's where we really need to involve Libby Gibson in the town and say, you are the property owner. You need to coordinate these entities, and we need to resolve this. I really don't think if we don't have the property owner, we'll get this solved. Seth and then Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to reach out and say, could you attend and present on this? And if they don't, then we need to issue an enforcement action requiring the property owner, the applicant, and the contractor to appear. I mean, we need them to be here. We can try to be collegial about it, and if no one wants to comply, then we'll essentially compel them to comply.
Thank you, Seth. So Jeff and then Joe.
No, I was just going to say, I think there are easy steps to that, and something I was going to talk about later may help to address that too. But I'll cover that in my administrator's report to little teaser for ahead. But I think it is something where, as a general rule for these things, obviously there's been a lot of lessons learned along the way from there. I'm not sure what licensing agreements are in place for the use of town-owned land for those structures, if they exist or not. And I don't keep those. I keep the orders of conditions. So that may also be something that may be an avenue to address it, is if it's not properly licensed through the town, if the town wants to then put a license onto those structures, that may be a way to compel compliance to it and then get the town through the select board engaged, because that's something that's issued through their office. So we can follow up on that as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
So using 36 Lily Street, which we just finished, but it's a perfect example of the moment you want to shut someone down or give a violation and levy out some fine, all of a sudden people start to show up. And I feel like we haven't done that. And people are thinking that this is just going to go away. And I feel like the moment that soil was put on SPPF tubes, then Netco's property was doing it at the same time, because it's all the same soil. I think that enforcement action should have been, violations should be starting from that date till today, and say you're looking at X amount. And this is where I think our enforcement and violation fees need to be, locked in sooner than later as much as possible. I just feel like no one's taking us seriously, and it's kind of frustrating. And I honestly, actually bringing that comment, I'm kind of a question for Jeff and town council. Can we send the enforcement orders to the town of Nantucket? Because if they're the landowners, I mean, I hate to say it, and Seth made a really good point that everyone involved is legally attached to this property, whether they put in the application, they did the work, or they're the landowners. I think that's something's really got to be brought forward, and a lot of people need to be brought to attention to what's the problem here for us. I just feel like it's just been not taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I agree, because we sent out letters to the select board like over 6 months ago and never have gotten a response about this area. So it's a big problem. And Jeff, I know you're going to speak next, but Netco is still under a stop work order for those sites, right? We never released them from that. So they're kind of still
Correct.
on the hook. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and to answer Joe's question, yes, we are able to issue enforcement actions to the town. To be honest, we probably, as far as a singular entity, have probably issued more enforcements to the town than anyone else. So that's just how it is. I mean, we've had, just, I don't want to rattle them off, but there's been Hummock Pond Road, Sacramento Pond. We can find other ones out there too that that's not an issue. I mean, they're subject to the same laws and rules and regulations as everybody else. I know we work for the town, and obviously probably not going to issue a monetary fine to the town, because the town will just be paying the town. But you can certainly compel action and deal with it that way. So that is not a problem.
Thank you, Jeff. Rick?
Yeah, just to, and Jeff may want to close, or you may want to close, but I think the discussion has been helpful. And I appreciate the dialogue with Joe about the multiple parties responsible. And I think as long as we all agree that all parties, including the party applying, hold responsibility, I think I can feel confident the commission will deal with the best way to move forward on this. So it's taken a while to get to that point, but it seems clear to me that that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any other thoughts from commissioners? So Jeff, what would you recommend we do here? Should we reach out to the town and try and get a representative for our next meeting? Or do you think we should try and get all entities involved for a later date?
I think we should shoot to get all entities involved for a later date. So I think I would say what we should probably do, kind of in keeping with our practice, is not necessarily issuing out the clear and definitive enforcement action. To do is, I think if we send, and I'm happy to send it to any property that benefits from the core too, is everybody, contractor, property owners, SBPF, and the town, to say, we are having a discussion on this date. You're expected to attend. If you do not, you'll be receiving enforcement action and we'll be ordering action. And that will probably get everybody here, and we'll get all of them all collected all at once. We'll have a little circus for you to manage, Ashley, but I think you're up to the task.
Yes.
And hopefully get some permanent resolution on this once and for all.
Yes, as you're saying that, it maybe should be a discussion on a separate from a meeting day. Just
Well, my thought would be, and I think the best opportunity, and to jump ahead to my administrative report for part of it, is we're going to get Greg Berman's report on SBPF's yearly report tomorrow. Is his estimated date of delivery for the rough draft for us to kind of look at and make sure it's there. So we'll probably have that final draft in hand for everybody of his review of the report sometime next week. I know we wanted to get it done before Christmas. So my thought would be is if we schedule the annual report review for SBPF for sometime in the middle of January, there would be no better day where all of those people may already be wanting to come, to just compel them further to attend, to not only deal with SE 2824, but to deal with all of these all at the same time when we have everybody kind of captive. So that would probably be my recommendation, is when we set that date, once we know for sure that Greg's report is in on time, that would seem to be the perfect opportunity to get all of those people to be in attendance.
Yes, I think that would be a great opportunity. I like that suggestion, Jeff. Start preparing myself for that meeting now.
And that way it would already be a separate discussion, so we could have it separate. But then again, we know for sure that SPPF would be present because they kind of have to be. And we can certainly collect those property owners who are probably interested in the Geo2 project. We can get someone from the town other than me to be there because they will probably also be interested in what's happening. So I think that's good, and may actually put this on the agenda first before the report, just to make sure that everyone is in proper attendance.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Rick, for bringing this back to our attention. I think this is the most kind of cohesive discussion we've had and made like progress for moving forward. So I think we're in a good spot. So if there are no other comments on this, we'll move on to commissioners' comments. And Ian?
Yes, so Madam Chair, I thought you'd be interested in having a look at this $2 bill that took me 4 months to have framed. And so when you were not reappointed the first time around, I had a friendly bet with a friend who was concerned you wouldn't be reappointed and bet me $1 that you wouldn't be reappointed. And I doubled him and said, I bet you $2 that you will be. And so here I have the proof. A souvenir of my time on Concom.
Don't take any wooden nickels, Ian.
I feel like Ashley should get the $2.
Well, there we go. Maybe I'll bequeath it to her when I step down. So, so back to our regulations. I noticed that we don't have any definition for pervious surfaces, and I'm thinking that at this point, with all the challenges that our wetlands face, that it might be a good idea to have some standards of porosity and how quickly, a definition of pervious and how quickly it absorbs water. So that's something that I'll send to Jeff to add to his workload. The other thing is, I'm not sure if my fellow commissioners are aware that the select board had a meeting this morning about SBPF, and I was wondering if executive session, and I'm not sure that anybody that from Concom was invited. I'm sort of slightly curious as to why not. Thank you.
Jeff, do you want to answer that?
Sure, and that's actually going to get to one of the things I was going to talk about in my administrator report. So I'll get to it. So the select board did have an executive session, that was an agenda item. None of us were in attendance. I wasn't in attendance. Ashley wasn't in attendance again. No one else was. And they discussed it at length. And while we were in our meeting, I was emailed, and the select board has asked if you guys would like to have a joint executive session on December 14th or 15th. So that's a Monday or Tuesday. They would prefer at 4 p.m., but can move to 5 if that works. But those are the two dates. Don't have to get back to me right now. But if people can email me as soon as possible to confirm, but I think they would like to get all 7 of you in the same place as all 5 of them to talk about the pending litigation related to SPPF. So that sounds to me like, without any other further detail, that's all I really got. Is it sounds like their discussion culminated in deciding that they wanted to speak to all of you guys about the pending litigation under the grounds of executive session with counsel, and make sure that everyone is at least in the know about what's happening. So I don't really have any other information other than they've asked if those 2 dates would be possible to have an executive session with you guys. So that's kind of what I got.
Thank you, Jeff. I know I can do either of those dates, but I'll email you so you have that information as a record that you can look back on.
Works for me as well. Works for me as well.
Okay. Any other commissioners' comments? Looks like no. Jeff, do you have anything else to report?
Again, I think that's it for me. That's all I was going to bring up, and I think we covered everything else that was pressing. We're still working on pulling the information together from the regulatory thing, and I think we're hopeful to have that kind of compiled with all that stuff to you guys by Christmas time too, so we can get back to it right on schedule after the new year.
Awesome.
And I told you about Greg Berman's report, so that's all I had.
Thank you, Jeff. I know we were stealing your reports throughout the meeting.
It's all right.
All right, so if there are no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, Ian?
Oh, no, a motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye, and Maureen, get well soon.
Yes, Maureen, get well soon. And
We miss you, Maureen.
yes, and it was only 3.5 hours today, guys. That was a short one compared to what we've been doing.
Thank you, Ashley. Good
No,
job.
thank you, everybody. It takes.
Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Good night, all.